Let's open the meeting, guys.
Yep.
Yes.
James, are you ready? I see.
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Coventry School Committee open session. I have 5:31. Could we have a roll call, please, Donna?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes?
Dave
Here.
Florio,
Sorry.
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson,
Here.
Craig Levis,
Here.
Don Cowett.
Here.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. McDonald. Is there a vote to go into executive session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to go into executive session
I
at 5:31 PM.
second the motion.
And could we have a roll call vote, Mrs. McDonald?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
All right, we will see you in executive session and we'll rejoin the public after our session. We'll be back by 6 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. I'm still waiting on Mr. Florio, I believe.
Hey Kathy, I think I saw him in the participants, so he may be in as an attendee. If Jim can pull him in.
Oh,
Him in
okay.
right now.
Thank you, Mr. Murray.
Sure.
There we go.
Okay.
You ready? Maggie? I just put it in here and they can't hear me.
We can hear you, Dave.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Maggie.
Okay, I think we're ready to begin. So good evening, everyone. I'd like to reconvene the open meeting. I have 6:02. And if we could have a moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. Thank you. All right, and I believe, Mrs. Colunian, it's your turn to read the mission statement for Coventry Public Schools.
The mission of Coventry Public Schools is to inspire, support, and challenge all students in an inclusive community to be critical thinkers, effective communicators, reflective learners, responsible individuals, and global citizens.
Thank you. And just to inform the public, the school committee met in executive session briefly before this meeting for about 10 minutes. During that meeting, we discussed our executive session minutes from 10/8/2020 and also our homeschooling requests. Both of those were voted on and the motions carried 5-0 in both cases. That being said, is there a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the records of the executive session be kept closed pursuant to 42-46-4 and 42-46-5.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented/amended.
I second the motion.
Are there any questions about that consent agenda? Hearing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
yes,
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, now we're moving into the public agenda. The public agenda for those attending. If there is an agenda item that's in the public part of our meeting, all participants, the attendees, are allowed to speak to that agenda item. If a motion is made and the committee is going to vote on a particular agenda item, before I call for the vote, the public will be allowed to give their opinions or ask questions or give their concerns before we actually call for the vote. That being said, we can move on. I think we're going to change the order of our meeting. We'd like to do number 7 first. The School Point's website hosting presentation by Josh Boyer, who is one of our panelists. So, Mr. Levis, did you want to
Sure.
introduce?
Just quickly, I just want to introduce Josh Boyer and just a little background information. We all know that, our website is very busy, can be challenging to find information. It's the positive, it's better than the website we had when I first came on board. At least we have a search, keyword search, but we all recognize that. In the past, we've looked at other vendors and they've come in $16,000, $30,000, and we know that we need to do something, but it never seems to be the right time. I happen to get an email that I get hundreds of vendor emails every week, maybe many more than hundreds. But there was an email that I received from Mr. Boyer that just jumped out at me, and I had a meeting with him. And then I brought in Mr. Murphy and Mr. Coward, and they met with Mr. Boyer. We shared information. They're a company, School Point, that just works with pre-K to 12 schools. And it's very cost effective. It meets a lot of our needs. It would have consistent sites, especially when we're doing the school building authority. We've talked a lot about communication, how important that is. We could have a dedicated site, I believe, working with them just on that. And Mr. Boyer, as you can see, he's a big Penn State fan. So right after my heart, Mr. Boyer. No, it's actually Ohio State. So anyways, I told him, we're very seriously considering working with School Point, but before we made any decision, I wanted to have him come before the committee and the community and share. We're excited because it'll address a lot of our needs. We know communication is crucial, and we hear that consistently. And our webpage is sometimes the first thing that people, when they're moving into town, are looking for information. And so having said that, I asked them to do a 10 or 15-minute presentation and then questions. So Mr. Boyer, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the introduction. Very kind words, diehard Buckeye. So I'm going to go ahead and turn everything into my presentation now. Please go ahead and confirm that you're able to see your website. Okay.
yes.
Okay. So a little bit about School Point. We're an Ohio-based company, as you can see. Buckeyes, we're just a few minutes from Ohio State. We service school systems only in the K-12 space. So we work with around 3,200 school systems in over 40 states at the moment. The email that Mr. Levis is mentioning is the site that I'm showcasing right now, Westerville City Schools. They are a school system that is in Central Ohio. They are over 16,000 students in over 30 buildings. They came to us after doing a recent survey to their community about trying to improve their web interface. So the situation that you're in right now is something that's not uncommon to us. We have designers on staff, we have developers on staff. Every team member that you deal with is a dedicated team member of School Point. We don't outsource any services of the product. All of our support team members are dedicated team members located directly in Columbus, Ohio. So if you're not a Buckeye fan, unfortunately, you're going to have to work with the Buckeyes on this one. So that being said, here's just some of the tools and capabilities that we provide within the design. So one of the things that you can look at and see right away is Westerville's design. They have a fully integrated calendar. One of the things that you're going to have access is you're a Google district. Your website itself, the calendar, Google Drive integration, it's going to automatically be able to pull information from the service provider that you're using now at the moment. It makes your life a lot easier. But we have a lot of interface options where social media integration, posting something one time, and then you can cross post to different buildings within your school system. We're doing a live board presentation. So this school system has their board presentation live directly on their actual website. So a lot of the things that you're seeing with Westerville applies directly to you. Here's a school system that just transitioned to us not too long ago. One of the things that really puts us above any of the competitors is our designers. We're going to work with you to kind of build the look and the feel that you're looking for on your website. Notice there's direct APIs from Twitter and Facebook. So we have social media integration directly within our system. So it'll allow you to post something to your website, but it'll also take that information out to social media accounts that are managed by the school system. Here's a school system in Wyoming, Kalispell, that just came on board with us. Notice the designs vary from site to site, and you can see there's need help with, where parents can find information relatively easier on the design itself. Notice there's a lot of variation, and that's one of the things that our team members are going to work with you on, finding the look and the feel that you're going after. So it's not something as just selecting a template. You're going to work with our design team. You'll fill out a questionnaire, and that allows our designers to really build Coventry Public Schools brand. And once this is launched, it's launched in a manner that's going to be the user interface for users that are on your actual website is going to be much more easy to find information. We offer in, translate options. There's search options where it's allowing me to be able to pull information up on your actual website. Here's a school system in Iowa that just came on board with us. Notice you can see there's an alert banner, and then as I'm looking at the website itself, it shows snapshots, selling points on the school system. Because one thing that's changing with technology, we're a technology company that's been around for 19 years. One thing that's changed is marketing yourself and marketing your school system. As prospective families are looking to move into areas, how they're doing their research is basically just done on the web. And if I go to your website and it doesn't give me an easy interface that I can, scroll and find information that I'm looking for much faster, it potentially leaves a negative impact on those particular users. So that being said, here's a demo account that I have within my system that I'll be able to kind of show you some of the tools. I went in and found a graduation video that you had on your website that I put directly into our product in less than 30 seconds. So one of the things that School Point's going to help do is we're going to build the district webpage. But as Mr. Levis mentioned, there's going to be consistency as we go through your building. So there's not going to be a different theme change. It's going to have their colors. It's going to have their identity. But more importantly, it's very consistent from the district main page. So that in turn makes the navigation for the end users much easier and much more likely to find everything that they're looking for. Logging into the system, our product itself is very granular. We do single sign-on with Google, with Microsoft and Active Directory. So being a Google district, all your users are going to be able to log into the system with not having to put in a password. They just authenticate themselves directly through Google, and they'll log in and be able to see the information that's necessary. One of the many benefits of School Point is, notice I'm looking at the main dashboard within School Point. So if I go to district management, I'm looking at all the district components that School Point provides. Some of the things that you have access to directly through School Point is survey components, athletics pages, and intranet. The intranet is a password protected environment for your staff to be able to see information that only applies to your staff. We have 88 tools that allow you to be able to, any content that you post in the system, our product automatically scans it to make sure that everything is fully compliant, that there's no OCR violations. OCR is a real thing, and it's happening every day where school systems are being cited. So we're a partner to you. We work hand in hand with you when we're setting the actual website up to make sure it's fully compliant as it's turned over to you. Some of the other components that we build within the system is a mobile interface. So one of the things that we do is not only are we going to build the actual website, but we're going to build a new mobile interface. So as I am looking at my demo account, When I come to your website from my phone, it's going to prompt me with downloading Coventry Public Schools mobile app. So as a parent, in my dilemma, I have a sophomore, and that's the only building that I'm necessarily concerned about is the high school for my son. So as a parent, I can opt into the buildings that I want to follow. So I can only check into the high school. The district is always a default, so I'm always going to receive information from the district. I also, as a parent, have the ability to opt into what forms of notifications that I'm getting, because mobile apps provide powerful tools such as push notification. So where you see Merrillville Community School Corp, it's going to be Coventry Public Schools. When you add news articles directly to SchoolPoint's website, it automatically publishes that information to the mobile app. It's not an extra step. It's not something that you have to do extra on your end. It takes that information directly to the app itself. Calendar information. As a parent, I want to be able to go in and look at a particular building, or I want to look at all the calendar events campus-wide. I can sync that information with my personal calendar. So as a parent, it's much easier for me to be able to follow along with that information. Staff directories, contact information, phone directories, all listed here directly through the mobile app. Your buildings are going to be able to control their presence on the app itself. So when I'm looking at the high school, that dashboard's all controlled directly through the website for them. So when I go to one of your elementaries or I go to your middle school, it's information that's relevant to them and they control it directly through the system. There's different variations of how the app displays. There's a school system in California. So you can see there's different interfaces for the end user. And that's one of the things that when we're working with you, we'll set it up on whatever preferences and whatever that you're looking for directly through the system. Notice all your branding is going to be carried across the actual website. So your colors, your logos are all going to be listed here on the app. It's all powered by Coventry Public Schools. So the only time they ever see SchoolPoint is on the initial load. But more importantly, you can see right here where I've got announcements. It just makes things easier for me to navigate directly through the app itself. So, the app is a very good component and a very important component that is all controlled directly through the actual website. Last but not least, kind of digging back and switching my presentation to the website, we are only focused in education. So that's one of the important things. We have a calling component that is one of the things I know that Mr. Levis, we spoke about. We just built contact tracing built directly within the system. So as classes are quarantined, I can search by a student's name, and that's going to allow me to be able to notify any child that has class with that particular student on any of that type of information. So as a technology company, we're constantly improving our system and making it better. The mobile app component and the website, we've been in business for 19 years. This is our industry. This is what we focus on. We operate on a 98% customer retention rate. And, how we do that is basing on a relationship. So we are a partner to the district, and how we improve our system is based on feedback from, yourself and other users within the system. So that's really all I have for my presentation. Any questions for me?
I don't have anything yet. I'm gonna go down our line though, because that's not usually what we do. So this is our second meeting of the month. So Mr. Pearson, do you have any questions or comments?
I'm sure I'll have tons of questions as we move forward with this. I don't want to get too far into the weeds here. I'm glad there's an ADA compliance component of this. In my past career, I used to work for an organization that helped sight impaired individuals in Rhode Island. So that's good to hear that we're going to support that, because it's important for certain populations to be able to access these websites, and it's often overlooked. I like the push notifications we can send through the application. I think that will be extremely helpful for us as a school district to be able to communicate with parents and students and whoever has downloaded the application. At some point, I'll have all kinds of questions about about privacy and PII and the kind of data we're collecting through the mobile app, what kind of tracking and analytics are being performed, and cookie consent and all that fun stuff, but I don't want to bore the committee with that. I like the single sign on also. I guess the one question I have is a geeky one. Does that support two-factor authentication, or are we just doing regular single sign on at this time?
You're going to be doing single sign-on. The mobile app component that we provide with our mass calling option, I know that's something that we'll look at in the future, or potentially down the road. It does do two-factor authentication directly within that. We have a sister product called Send It that would replace your school messenger services. It's fully integrated directly through the actual website. So one thing, Mr. or James, you can see is when I log in to Send It here, it allows me to be able to post messages with one particular message, whether I'm using the mobile app, but I can post to social media, I can post to your website, I can send out calls, I can send out announcements directly to every single platform with one particular message. So we do support two-factor authentication with that. So I think long-term, that's hopefully where we go to on that route.
Okay, great. I think for now, that's all I have. I'm glad to see we're looking into a platform like this, as Mr. Levis stated. As much as our website has improved, at the same time, it's also still very difficult to navigate and find things. And that's no fault of the people putting the website together. It has to do with the technology and limited bandwidth to be able to manage it. So looking into better ways we can engage our community through, social media, the web, mobile apps, I think would be a big win. So I'm appreciative of the presentation. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian.
This is really nice. It's very easy on the eyes, and like Mr. Pearson said, it's nice to have something, because what we have now you can't navigate it well. I really, really like the app. I think that's great. I'm all about, my phone's got a million apps on them. I'm all about company apps and all of that. So I think that's wonderful. And as a former parent, I'm still a parent, but as a former parent of a school-aged child, I wish they had that when my kids were growing up. It would have been much easier for me. But that's beautiful. It's like, to look at that, it really, it pops. I think it's really what we need to move the school into the 21st century. So kudos, nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Murray.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate the presentation. I think the administration and some members of the committee know where I stand on this, because I've been pretty vocal about the fact that we need a new website. It was absolutely necessary to get communication out to the district, and also just the image of the district is what I consider a multi-million-dollar organization, right? So I think this definitely, the examples you've shown, definitely more conform with today's standards and what we're seeing in other comparable school districts. I'd only caution that I think the video you picked was Coventry, Connecticut. So when you're doing stuff, just make sure you're aware there's a separate Coventry, Connecticut. But
we're going to leverage that for a discount.
That's right.
I apologize.
Minor
I
oversight.
was so excited I found that, so my apologies.
Yeah, it's okay. It's happened to me. Actually, when you type into Google Coventry, Connecticut comes up a lot, but it's very difficult to find our site through just a simple Google search. So it tells a lot.
We can help change that with some SEO and some site indexing as well. So one of the things that our system will allow you to do is tagging pages. So as you start to identify paging and lunch menus, you can tag that directly within the system. So when Google is searching sites, it'll help people index your site much faster. So in turn, ranking you higher up the list from the neighbors, because we don't want that.
Yeah, and as we add better content, such as, I know that YouTube tends to push video websites up because of the .NET designation. It's easy to mistake too. So it's not a more common address. But a couple quick questions. Transparency portal. Have you done districts? I had done some research on some districts that had really good examples of the transparency portals, where you can pull up information about the district, contracts. So from a school committee level, we get a lot of inquiries. So policies, contracts, financial information. Do you have any examples of that you could show us?
Yeah, I can do my best real quick. One of the things that you have the ability to do when we're setting up the actual website itself, a lot of school systems have dedicated procurement departments where they post their bids and that type of information. One of the things that you'll have access to do within our system is be able to set up any type of page structure that you want. So one of the things that you can see here when I'm looking at Westerville City Schools, you have the ability to, and how we classify this within our system is just navigation. So when we're setting up a navigation menu, it could just be basing directly towards showcasing, as opposed to saying school tax levy information. It could have upcoming bond, upcoming agendas specific to that area. I mean, that's really a tough question to be able to answer. One of the things that you can kind of see here is Westerville has a community portal. And I think this probably goes pretty hand in hand with what you're referring to. So as we're looking at the demo account here, you can see annual reports, athletics, board policy, bullying reports, calamity day information. And that's just content that you as a district will be able to manage and update on your own. One of the things that we do is we have outstanding relationships with our customers, and you're probably not going to be trying to recreate the wheel. So with our direct support team members and our project managers that are helping with assisting other clients on this, depending on your questions and what you're looking to implement and roll in with the site, we can kind of instruct you and lead you in the way of what the best plan of operation with that. Transparency, if you're just looking at this right here on the Westerville site, I mean, that's kind of goes hand in hand with what I think you were asking. One of the things that you have the ability to do within SchoolPoint is you can make public and private facing pages. So for the Board of Education, you can have agendas and documents that only your board members can log in and be able to see. So obviously that's going to be a more restricted login process. And then you can have your information that displays generally to the public as well. So if I answered that question properly, I think this might be a good example of what you're asking. If not,
yeah, I think it somewhat is. You know, I think the overriding is it needs to be simple, you know, kind of easy WYSIWYG interface where it's icon based, very simple. Where is the information? So where are the meeting minutes? Where can I get the financial information? Very, you know, that I guess would come more down to design on either your part or I don't, you know, that leads into another question I have, which is design wise, who leads the design? Because typically, and you know, I know the company models typically with websites is, you know, you service a certain market. I'm assuming you have certain general templates you fit into. You'll work with the district to kind of get them going in a certain direction. I'm seeing a back end here with the ticketing system. I don't, going forward, would you be maintaining and designing the site, or would it fall back to the district to then continue to add content, pages, etc.?
So to answer your question, when we're working through the actual design process, we do have templates. But one of the things was quoted out with Mr. Levis was a full-blown custom design. We waived the cost of the update for that just because we felt that design is very important. And that's one of the things that we have dedicated designers and project managers that will work directly with you with putting together the look and the feel of the actual website, because this is, you know, it's a very involved process. And what I mean by that is once you fill out your questionnaire, our designers will work with you through design consultations and setting up the district page and then all your buildings within the district itself. So we can build whatever it is that you're looking at. This is our field. This is our expertise. So we'll try to take the lead to assist, but
We also have clients that are very, strict on, hey, we just paid for a branding package through another vendor. This is what we want to implement. This is what we want to roll over, and we'll do whatever. End of the day, you're the customer, and as long as you're happy, that's what makes us happy. So design wise, when we're building that with you, once we turn that over, we'll train you and your staff on whatever area of the product that they're going to be maintaining. The big benefit of the product that you're looking at now through the dashboard is it's all granular. So your building level webmasters will only see the building that they have access to. Your teacher web pages your teachers will only see teacher web pages if they have access to it. So you're able to limit users down to a particular model or module within the system, or give them overall full access to be able to, be the gatekeeper of every area of the product. The ticketing system, the ADA compliance tools, the intranet, the survey, those are all free within the system that the district and all the buildings have access to be able to use if granted access through the product.
Okay, so I guess my basic question is, are you maintaining this after, like, you're gonna send us on our way with a package, and once the site's deemed done with a certain number of pages and the core content, we're essentially managing it?
That's correct. We do
Okay, so-
ongoing training, professional development with your staff. We've got free phone support, free instant messaging chat support on every area. There's not different tiers of support, so you don't have to pay for support packages. Being an ongoing customer, support is free for your organization.
Okay, I mean, that drives to my point. The content's ours. It's hosted on our web, on our server.
No,
Correct.
it's hosted directly through our location itself. Our infrastructure through server facilities is all AWS. So it's something that it's much more protected, much more efficient, hosted on our end. Plus, it's one less thing that you have to worry about and manage on your end. We do the
Yes.
nice backups. We've got the redundancy. It's all handled on our end.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree with that. I own my own business and never chose to host anything like that on my own site. It would obviously makes more sense to host it on a third party. I'm assuming it's a minimal maintenance cost associated with that?
The hosting is all just built into the service itself. So there's not additional. One of the things I spoke with Craig about early on was trying to help you with some of the SEO stuff and trying to get placement of Coventry Public Schools higher in the listing. He said that you were 3 or 4 down on the list. So that was one of the areas that we want to try to help improve, and try to get you placed up in the staff listings. And I think we do that right away just with a lot of the SEO features built in the product.
Okay. No, I think it's great. I think the only thing, just in my experience in building these sites, what happens is once you get the content, it's just you have to really box people in, because what happens, quite honestly, is we don't tend to have the resources, right? Nobody does. So we'll just throw content on there. And that's kind of what's happened with our existing site. Content is just kind of thrown on there. And because there's not enough confined boxes and sort of interface to control that, it's gotten a little out of control. It's almost like the filing cabinet without any folders that are numbered or marked. So as long as we're going to end up with a product that's very tight and that is easy to manage, because ultimately what I'm saying is we're going to take over the content uploads over time and modifications. So, I just want to make sure that we can sustain it and make sure it doesn't explode,
Those are very good questions. One of the things that you'll have the ability to do within the system is your news articles are all set on start dates and expiration dates. So you're not holding older content on the site. It's not a manual process where I have to go in and remove something. Any image that's uploaded through our system is automatically resized and converted. So you don't have to worry about compressing files or anything like that. So cross-posting content. So at the district level, if you need to get a news article out district-wide, it's just a checkbox here directly through the system. So we try to simplify the process itself. I know technology can sometimes be challenging to work with, but one of the things that we really try to do is make our user interface very intuitive for the users. So when I create something, I'm not the most technical person in the world. So when I'm just looking at an option, we've got compliance and accessibility built directly within the editor. So before I post anything, it makes sure that website is fully compliant. So, again, just protecting the school system. There's spell check. I've got multiple degrees and I still can't spell to save my life. So it's just one of those things that there's things that are built for people like me that, again, makes life easier.
I think it's great. Definitely technology's gotten much better on the back end of this. And hopefully that a lot of these tools will help management on our side, so I appreciate that. And last question, I know you referred to it, but I'm assuming we're going across all of the school websites are going to be now combined into this one platform. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we'll build the actual district webpage. So the easiest way to reference that would be looking at Westerville City Schools. There are over 30 buildings. So one of the things that we'll be able to do is carry over consistency. So when you're looking at this design, it's all the brand from that particular building. Now the navigation and the menus become specific to that location. One of the things that with Westerville is important is brand and identity at the district level and at the high school level. So a lot of their buildings carry over at the elementary and the middle school are all very similar to the district. But as you get to the high school, now we see different colors that's specific because, you know, they've got 3 high schools. They're in the process of building a 4th high school. You know, their identity for those high schools is really important. So one of the things that we added in, notice there's their colors for Westerville Central. But when I'm looking here now at the right-hand side of the portion, it says Schoology, Power School, staff list. It really specifies that down to that particular building. So again, it allows them to be able to manage it and make things specific and consistent on their end.
No, that's great to hear. I mean, I appreciate all the principals and all the building level work they've done with their own Weebly sites and GoDaddy sites and all the different things we have. But I think from a parent standpoint, navigation, sometimes it's frustrating because I just want to go to one site, trickle down, go to the building level, get the schedule, and I can find things logically. And I found that just as a parent difficult to pass. So that's a welcome change from my standpoint.
One of the things that was working with Westerville City Schools, they sent a survey out to their community and they quickly found out that, and I can provide that information to you after the fact, but they quickly found out that 3 heavy hitter items that people were coming for was news information, calendar information, and lunch information. So as you're looking at this website, this is one of the largest schools in Central Ohio. So as you're looking at the website, they've got one image that's rotating or it shows here, and it's all based on lunch menu. Notice the next area down is calendar information and then news articles. Notice I'm not having to click back and forth. It allows me to be able to set things up. It's easy. There's not a lot of scrolling involved. So these are things that our design team and designers will work with you on to kind of find the elements that are important to Coventry Public Schools and as we're setting that up for you.
Well, I'm sure it'll be a welcome change for everybody. So that's all I have, Josh. Thank you. You've been very informative.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Florio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Josh. Very professional presentation. Way over 10, 20 minutes, but you did a great job. Question, what is a calamity day?
Great question. Calamity Day, Ohio schools have 5 calamity days, and what calamity days are considered is a day that is pretty much set up as if there's a snow delay, they're given 5 days for a weather-related issue, whether it's snow, fog, or whatnot. So all Ohio schools have 5 calamity days. Once they go over that 5 calamity days, then they're required to make those days up. So in a long roundabout way, that's a calamity day. It's a weather-related issue or a prime example, COVID right now. My son's school's quarantined 70-some kids right now at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. How much is it? $30,000? Was that the issue? Was that the amount that I heard correct? That for your
Dave, I did this presentation didn't discuss price. I had mentioned that we looked at other vendors and they were a significant amount of money. One vendor was $30,000. It was going to be like $16,000 annually. So
thank you, Levis, and thank you, Josh. Also, Josh.
Yes, sir.
Who's in charge?
The president of the company. I'm
okay.
I'm the VP. We've got over 30 employees here at the moment.
And if there's a problem, who do we speak to?
Well, that depends. That's a great question. My cell phone number is attached to any email that I have. So one of the things I do, I've been with the company for 19 years. So since we acquired the business, I've been here. So I pride myself on support and relationships. So I would encourage anybody to call me personally because, again, I can make things happen. If it's something that is During business hours, support lines, we have 800 numbers where you can call in. Upon logging into the system, there's chat features where you can chat directly with our team members. But off hours, we have tier 2 support where if it's a critical issue,
Mhm.
you can call other dedicated team members, but you can also call me.
Okay, so the dedicated team members, they work 24/7 or they're on call?
Yep, they're on call.
Okay, and who's going to manage this for the town of Coventry? Who- Would you have a local manager or would you be managing this?
I would oversee the entire process itself, but you would be granted your own dedicated customer service manager and project manager. So working with that, there's different levels of this process that's going to be involved. You'll work initially with one of our project managers and our designers to set up the actual look and the feel of that. The designer that I think that we've already kind of spoke about and dedicated to the account was Christy Young. She's been a team member of ours for over 4 years. We have a project manager named Melissa Miller who would be handling this project, but we've got quite a few team members you would be working directly with in different areas of the process itself.
Well, who would you be working directly with the town of Coventry?
That just depends on who we dedicate that's going to be managing this project for your school system.
Okay,
Dave, we would identify that person, Dave.
okay. Do you have someone identified yet, Craig?
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Okay, very good. Just needed to know, that's all. Thank you both. Great presentation. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. So Josh, again, thank you for a wonderful presentation. It's really appreciated. It has a lot of amazing things compared to what our present website and what we've been used to dealing with. I again love the whole idea that the app is so user-friendly. A lot of our parents, that's all they're going to do is go to an app on their phone. They're not going to visit the website. And so to have that ability in a different look, I mean, an app is so much different with those icons. You can just, instead of using their phone to try to go to a website, which is hard to navigate. I find that just really great. I'm not an app person. I have barely, a number of apps on my phone. But I know that I'm on, probably my age more than anything. Everyone that works with me where I work that are young kids, they do everything on their phone. Things that, I mean, they even file their taxes on their phone, which in a million years I never would do. So I think the ability to have an app will really appeal to everyone, including our kids. I suspect there's lots of students that never go on our website. And having this at their fingertips, I think would really make their lives, they connect much easier to the information that they need to connect to. So from that perspective, I love it. I noticed, I think in the reading, I did notice you have one Connecticut school. Is that true?
We have Waterbury Public Schools. There's a few, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I provided a contact list of customers in the East Coast initially to Craig and some of your other administrative. I can provide that and send that later on.
No, I think if I were, obviously I'm not an administrator in the school system, but if I were going to be the one responsible to get into the intranet, by way of my own login or whatever to all those things, and I'm sure Jim Murphy, understands all of that stuff. I particularly don't. But I would like to be able to look at a site and be granted access like I actually own that site, like I was part of that community. I don't know if that's a possibility. It's sort of like being in the driver's seat to know, like, if in fact there is someone in Coventry that's kind of chosen as still the sort of the website guru person, how difficult will it be for that person to keep things updated? Because that's always been a problem. And how difficult or easy will it be for our principals in the individual schools? Will they still have to kind of send the information to Jim Murphy to post it? Or will they be given that ability, or do we even want to do that? And do some school systems do that? Those are all the kind of things that I'm kind of wondering about in my head, but I don't know. If you could answer those quickly.
No, I mean, good questions. The product itself will allow you to be able to cross-post data. So if you have news articles at the district level that you'd like to publish out to the buildings, it's just a checkbox. So when you're looking right here at the admin, it's something as simple as selecting your building location. So, I mean, to answer your question properly, no, we don't want your buildings to not be using the product, because that totally defeats the purpose of the product. It's our job to educate your staff and train them properly on how to be able to use it. At the end of the day, the interface of this product is very intuitive. It's simplistic, where I can go in and, looking at the header galleries on some of our sites, you have the ability to go in and set the transition. There's cropping tools. I can link out to YouTube. I can add in Vimeo. But more importantly, the product itself is very user-friendly. So I think personally, and this is just my opinion, of course, I'm very passionate about what I do and being a part of this company, but I think that we're doing you a disservice if your staff cannot use our product. That's our responsibility to train and educate them, and we do that. We work with school systems all across the country, and the biggest thing that we hear the most of is the enhancements, the constant improvement within our system. But more importantly, it's our interface is very simple and easy to use. So I don't think that your staff would struggle. And I think it comes down to, when we roll over this process, it's a very, we're doing trainings and involved trainings with those users and educating them how to manage. And it's supposed to be exciting, because as we rebrand your site and redo it, we want it to go positive for your community. We want it to go positive for your parents and staff members, because at the end of the day, that's the people that are going to be using it. So, I mean, that's our commitment. I mean, I single-handedly, if I have to fly to your location to help out with training, I'll do it. I'm happy to.
That's good to hear. Thank you so much. I don't have any other questions. I don't know if anybody from, Craig, did you have any final comments or concerns?
No,
for
I
Josh?
just want to, I mean, there's, we've been speaking with Josh for probably a month, 6 weeks. Like I said, we've heard this, and everything we've looked at before was just cost prohibitive, especially Josh understands where we're at in our situation, in our current situation. We're working off of less money than we had last year, and it's a pandemic. But this seemed, something that we could do. Right now we have 7 different buildings managing their own. And so, we have a lot of things that we can put in place, systems to put in place. But I think the framework here, the controls that we can put in place, just on that, you look at the legend on the left, just like alumni, things that we just don't offer right now. He mentioned about School Messenger, for about the same price, we could switch over. So it's really one-stop shopping once our contract ends. I mean, there's so much, the ticketing, all these things that we have, all these archaic or old systems that don't interface in this one product. And so, I think it's, I never thought we'd be able to do it during a pandemic, but, all I hear is communication, and we're exhausted. Everybody's exhausted. This is an opportunity to really change our position, both when people search for us and when people are looking for information. That everybody asks me for information, and we put some things up. We have a lot more we need to put up. There's only so much time in a day. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us. We have a few more conversations to have, but I feel this will really help us moving forward with, like I said, the school building authority. I mean, a committee. There's so many agendas that we have going forward that we need to find a way to not just keep on adding information to our current website. So I think there's so many upsides to this. So I want to thank Josh, because he's been very willing to do whatever we've asked him to do to support, this whole process. So I just want to say thank you.
No problem. Happy to help out again. And we appreciate the opportunity for allowing us to present and consideration. If there's anything else that's needed on my end, let me know. I'm happy to comply.
Well, this was really an exciting presentation, so I thank you. Before we let you go, we have about 25 people in the public listening, and so they are able to ask questions or make comments. So I don't see any hands up right now. Mr. Murphy, do you?
No, there was a hand raised.
So I'll give it a little bit more time just in case someone does have a question.
Hopefully they don't have complaints about my beard.
Just want to
All
remind
right.
Josh to watch Penn State this weekend, Josh, okay?
Greg, you had me scared going into Happy Valley, but I actually was really happy with how we performed. So we got Indiana this week, though, so hopefully we don't mess up on that one.
All right, well, I don't see any hands raised, so I think we probably can move on. So thank you again, Josh, and really appreciate your time and your effort and your work with our administration. So stay healthy and safe out there in Ohio.
You guys as well. Again, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
evening.
You're
Josh.
welcome. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess we can move to agenda item number 6, which is the celebration of Coventry Public Schools Administration. Mr. Levis?
Yes, I just, and I'll be brief. I spent a lot of time thanking people. I feel that, I can't even put words on how challenging these days are, for me, both personally and professionally. I think I don't know if I shared, but my son was tested positive. I had to live with him, but when it hits home like that, it's a whole different ballgame. And I have my cousin lives down the road a quarter of a mile, and 5 out of 7 family members. And, you just start seeing this stuff. And yet, and let's face it, we're in the people business. All we do is it's about taking care of people. And I try to thank everybody every week and every day. And, it's wearing on a lot of us. I know Mr. Coward and I, we work very closely together. Many people, Ms. Mandrelli, and I can be on a little edge, and I have to go back and say, hey, I hope you don't take it personal. There's a lot going on, and but I just wanted to say tonight that I couldn't do this. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for the people that that I work with, my colleagues. I've thanked our educators, our staff. I constantly thank our nurses for what they're doing, our custodians. I don't want to, I always forget somebody, but our clerks, everybody has been putting in 100%. But I got to tell you that, our administrators, they're dealing with their own families, their own situations. They're in the buildings or they're in the office every single day. And, unless you walk into somebody's shoes, right, you have no idea. At least I know. I have no idea what anybody else's life is like. But I don't know if this community realizes how fortunate they are to have the administrative team we have, whether it's our building base, our principals. Nobody's had time off. To think that we've had time off since March 13th, it's been continuous. Every day they've been working on things. We're constantly having to revise our plans, and for good reasons. There's been a lot of talk about discussion around the high school schedule, and we've had a lot of feedback. We've known that there needs to be changes, and we're working. They've been working hard on that. But the administrative team, I just need to say, I am so blessed as superintendent. The work that they do every single day, and like I said, I can't imagine, there's been changes over time, and I think, we keep on just getting tighter and tighter. And, I look forward to working with every single one of my administrative team. And I just wanted to thank them publicly for everything that they've done. And I know it's just words. I wish I could give them money, and I wish I could, take them out to dinner and just say thank you, but we can't do that these days. But they've done such an amazing job. And I include the leadership of the union as part of our team. I talk to a lot of colleagues. We don't always agree, and we have a lot of challenges that we deal with together. But they're part of our team, and we've worked hard to accomplish that. And I want to thank them too, because we have 750 employees. We're responsible for almost 5,000 students, 7 buildings. almost an $80 million budget that we manage and keep that focus on students. I know there's challenges and we have the additional challenge because of our financial situation, and yet they show up every day, and despite all the noise, they keep that focus on students. And so I just wanted to publicly say thank you. Like I said, I am so blessed to have the colleagues that I work with and the administrative team. And I wanted the committee and the community to hear that. Like I said, these are incredibly challenging days. We don't know what we're going to be faced with. We are working so hard to try to keep our buildings open. And I don't think, I go in our elementary schools, we said from day one, in terms of we have our students in 4 days a week. And, our teachers, I was in Hopkins Hill the other day and a teacher came to me, they don't know what's going to go on, but the teacher says, please keep our kids in school, keep us in school. And like I said, we're doing the best that we can every single day, but it's because of this leadership team. They have incredible staff. They believe in their staff. They support their staff. And just a testament to their character, their passion and their commitment. So it's my long-winded, concise way of saying thank you. And I'm so appreciative. And like I said, I'm so blessed. And I just want to thank each and every one of them for their commitment to this community. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Levis. Mr. Pearson, did you have any comments or remarks concerning this subject?
Nope, I think it's important to thank people for their hard work, probably more often than we do. So thank you for your hard work. I'll just echo everything Mr. Levis just said. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian?
Ditto. I do think that it's important because people like to hear that they're appreciated. And I think that's nice that you formally did that tonight, Mr. Levis. And I do appreciate them also.
Thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Murray?
I think it's nice that we acknowledge people in public and, it's not lost. So I appreciate the comments of the superintendent. I know it's hard right now. Public service is a hard job in general. And then the current events notwithstanding. So I know everyone's a little stressed out as a parent, as a professional. I know I am. And I'm sure they're double in the school world. So I also appreciate them. And I missed one thing in the last topic I'll bring up now, but it's related to this, which is thank you for listening and continuing to move forward initiatives in a very tough time, because it's easy to focus on all the crisis and not look forward. Things like the website may not seem priority, but they are. They're priority for the future building, which we need to continue to focus on while we deal with the current crisis. So I appreciate the fact that the administration listened. They're listening to parents, to listen to the school committee, to listen to others around them to move these things forward and not get caught up just in the moment. And I also do appreciate the fact that they are also dealing with the moment right now. And I know it's hard. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. And finally, Mr. Florio.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Thank you, school administrators. You work very hard under some difficult situations. I see the emails come through every day. I see what happens in our community. I saw what happened in our community over the weekend. And also the teachers and the teacher aides and the support staff and the maintenance people. You're working under some very, very stressful circumstances, and our children, as you can tell, are being affected by it as well. And thank you for all your hard work and all your efforts. It's deeply appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. And I think I would echo all of the positive remarks and thank you. I think it's really, really important to thank folks for the hard work that they do. And I want to also echo with what Mr. Murray said in the following way as well, that oftentimes in a crisis-filled situation like we're dealing in right now, the vision of our future gets put in a back seat somewhere. And people forget that the work of educating kids still has to happen. The work of, our future with the building committee still has to happen. And even though you're putting out fires every single day because of COVID, it's also important to realize that you're still doing your regular work too, on top of all of that. So curriculum hasn't stopped. Finance and running the budget doesn't stop. Trying to come up with the new budget, all of that work still continues with the added pressure of putting out fires every single day. So again, I appreciate all of the work that's done and the fact that you keep your eye still on the prize of moving us forward. So it's greatly appreciated, and I thank you all as well. So thanks. And before we move on, I would throw it out to the public if there were any attendees that had any comments to make or wanted to speak. If you could just raise your hand and Mr. Murphy will bring you into the meeting. I see one hand, Mr. Murphy.
Okay. Kelly, you're up. If you could just state your name and address for the record and unmute your microphone.
Kelly Aronakis, 18 Ironwood Drive. I just want to echo that and say thank you. I know that, a lot of times people focus on teachers and it's teachers in the classrooms and teachers working with kids. But I do have to say that I think administration is working incredibly hard. Something as silly as if you get an email saying, we're waiting for the Department of Health to do contact tracing. I don't realize if you know that contact tracing begins at the school level, and each administrator has to look at every kid and every 7 classes that kid was in that day and the 15 kids per class they were in contact with. And it's really the administrator that does all that contact tracing, sends that information to Department of Health, and then Department of Health just makes the quarantine phone calls. So above and beyond having IEP meetings and working with students and dealing with discipline and dealing with curriculum and dealing with schedulings and every single phone call that comes through, I think everyone is stretched. I think everyone is getting a little maybe short-tempered at times. I think everyone's getting actually a little depressed because of what we're dealing with every day. But I do want to say that I think teachers get a lot of praise, which is appreciated because they work hard as well. But I don't think administration gets the praise. And I think saying it as the union president, I hope it holds some weight. And that is administration at every level. So that is the building based. If there's assistants in the building, it is the central office level. I see firsthand from dealing with all the constituencies that everyone is over capacity. It's taking its toll on people. So I too am very glad for the thanks that you're giving, but I hope central office receives the thanks as well. So, good job to everyone. I just think that we need to lean on each other and pick each other up because these times in public schools right now are extremely difficult. I'm coming off a DOH quarantine myself. It's very, very difficult. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Aronakis. I couldn't agree more with those comments. I don't see any more hands raised, Mr. Murphy. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's no more.
Okay, then I think we can move on. And I noticed that Mr. Anderson has arrived, but I think we can, we only have one more agenda item and then I don't think we have to move anything, correct? All right, so I think our next agenda item is number 8, which is the school committee meeting schedule. Did you want to start this, Mr. Levis?
Yeah, well, I mean, Mrs. McDonald obviously puts this together. I know we've had conversations in the past. I don't know, Mr. Murphy, if you want to put it up on the screen, if you can, while I'm speaking briefly here. But so there's 2 calendars we put. There's a school calendar, and then this is, and Ms. McDonald can explain it, I'm sure, be much more articulate than I can. But the Attorney General requires us to submit a calendar. So that's what I believe this calendar is that we're required to submit from January through December. So I'll turn it over to Ms. McDonald, and I know Mr. Anderson's here too. If there's any legal questions about it, I stopped playing a lawyer a long time ago. So, Ms. McDonald, do you have anything you want to say about
Sure.
this?
No, Craig was right. This is the Secretary of State's calendar, which is the calendar year, January to June, January to December, I'm sorry. We also have to do the school calendar for the school committee, which is July 1st to June 30th. So these are the dates for the calendar year that has to be posted with the Secretary of State's website very soon. I have some notes at the bottom. There are some dates in question that the committee will have to decide on. For instance, in May, the May meeting happens to fall on the FTM night. So do you have to decide if you want to forego that meeting and have just one meeting in May, or move it up to the week before and the week after, have the first and third Thursdays of the month for May instead of second and fourth, or you can't have the second in this case. That's just one example for the May. November, second and fourth Thursdays happen to fall Veterans Day and Thanksgiving. So both weeks are off at that time. So you can do first and third, or you could do no meeting for the first one and have the third Thursday and have one meeting in November. And then in December, we only have one meeting anyway because of the holiday break. So it's up to the committee to decide.
Thank you, Mrs. McDonald. I'll start with Mr. Pearson. Do you have any thoughts on this, or are you willing to just post this without, with the asterisks on the no meetings? What's your feeling?
I don't like asterisks. So I'm in favor of shifting the May meetings to, I think it would probably benefit us to meet a week before the financial town meeting. And same with November. We should probably shift week earlier for both to avoid conflicts with Veterans Day and Thanksgiving.
That's fine with me. Mrs. Kalunian, what's your feeling?
I agree with James as far as the shifting, but I thought that in July, we only had one meeting because we had like a little summer break.
I don't think so. I think we've always had two meetings in July, but I could be wrong.
Correct. The only month we have one meeting is December, historically.
Yeah, I think the town council does, but
I know they did. I thought we did when I first started also.
it may have been an aberration, but I only remember, typically the only month we only have one meeting is December, but you could go back and check maybe, but otherwise, any other questions? No, or you're good?
Mhm.
Okay. Mr. Murray?
Yeah, I concur with James. I think having a meeting before, even though it's going to butt up against the April 29th meeting, we'll only have, looks like it's only going to be a week apart. But I'm sure there'll be a lot to discuss. There's usually a lot going on during then. So, this schedule, I'm sure, can be modified later in the process if for some reason we determine it's not necessary. But I'm following James's logic, and I agree.
Thanks. Mr. Florio?
I agree.
Okay. So do we have actual dates for those no meeting things?
So I'm coming up with May 6th for the first meeting in May, and we'll keep May 20th. Is that correct? For May?
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
And what about November?
November 4th and the 18th.
Sounds good.
And
Okay.
then we'll still hold true with the one meeting in December.
December. Yep. Okay.
Then
That works.
I can make those corrections, and if you approve it tonight, I can get it to the Secretary of State tomorrow.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
So I don't have any questions. I'm good with those changes. So is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the school committee schedule for the calendar year 2021 be referred to the Secretary of State. And Donna, could you email me a copy of those minutes?
Yes, I will. I'll send it to everyone tomorrow.
Copy of those dates, that's all.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
I second the motion.
And I think you may have misspoke, Mr. Florio. It's calendar 2021. Oh,
21.
you said 2021. I got it. All right, thanks.
welcome. Yeah.
Any other questions? Hearing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colonian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Motion carries 5-0. I didn't ask the attendees, but I don't really think they have much to say on our meetings per se, our schedule. So if there was anybody out there that wanted to say something, please raise your hand. Sometimes I forget to ask that question. All right, moving on to agenda item number 9. I'd just like to start this conversation by saying that at our last meeting, there was some discussion that was in the background on someone's feed, and it just brought forward the thought that we should, as a committee, discuss how we present ourselves during Zoom meetings. I know it's a different format for us, but we still are required to adhere to open meetings, and there's a spirit of the open meetings law that I think we probably should think about and talk about. One of which is, during a public meeting, people shouldn't be on their phones. You know, I've discussed this publicly before with the committee. I've asked individual committee members to stay off their phones during a meeting, that it's not appropriate, especially because you don't know who you might be talking to. And it may have nothing at all to do with the meeting agenda and be a personal phone call. You can always excuse yourself from a meeting and go and take an emergency phone call. But during a meeting, you really shouldn't be busy on your phone. First of all, it's disrespectful to the audience because they can see you looking down at your phone. And then secondly, you're a suspect that you're discussing something that's not now in the public agenda. So you shouldn't be having a conversation with anyone other than the school committee members and the public who is on our Zoom meetings listening. So because of that, and on the advice of our attorney, Mr. Anderson, we spoke and I said, you know, there's a couple of things that have made me uncomfortable that I should have probably dealt with previously. And one is this chat function, which, you know, we have disabled tonight and will continue to disable during our meetings. And I think I asked for that because it's like having a parallel conversation that the rest of the committee may or may not be involved in. I personally was always distracted when people were asking questions in the chat and other committee members were answering it, especially the elected members, or even if the superintendent was answering, it's still not part of the real public discussion and you can lose things and it's just not appropriate. And Mr. Anderson said, you know, that many districts have disabled that function. And so on the advice of our council, I agreed 100% with that and really think that it's not a function that we should be doing during a school committee meeting. I personally, I'm just way too distracted by it. And so that being said, and then the second thing is we shouldn't be texting during a meeting. We shouldn't be talking during a meeting. If you have an emergency phone call, you know, you should shut your video off, shut your microphone off and go someplace and privately take care of it. We don't expect you never to be on I mean, obviously, you know, you might have an emergency phone call. I mean, when I get, you know, most of my friends know I'm on school committee on Thursday nights, so they don't bother me. But obviously everyone, you just never know. So again, I think that's important that we keep to that rule, that we don't text while we're at a meeting, text each other, text our friends, text attendees, talk to attendees. It's just against what I think is the spirit of the open meetings law, even though Zoom meetings are a little different, obviously. I still think it's pretty obvious to the public if you're not concentrating on the meeting and being engaged. And so I think it's an important conversation for us to have. And I know Mr. Anderson was here. I don't know if you wanted to follow up with anything, Mr. Anderson, before I put it out to the committee.
No, I will echo what you said. I have other school committees that I represent that have discontinued the chat function because frankly, there were two meetings going on. There was the meeting that was on the agenda that was published pursuant to the Open Meetings Act and put on the Secretary of State website and was put out in Coventry to parents ahead of time. And then there was a separate meeting talking about school business going on at the same time. And as the chair indicated, from time to time, the two meetings would overlap because somebody on the Zoom call would then start answering somebody in the chat room. And this has been a problem in two of the other school districts I personally represent and attend their school committee meetings, and they have disabled the chat room. I also will echo what the chair has said about the importance of respect and civility. That this is not the way that I think any of us want to conduct meetings, but it is the way that for the foreseeable future that we are going to conduct meetings. And I think that it's everything she said is spot on.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And I just want to follow up that most of us do, cut our mics when we're not talking. I think that's a really good thing to do. Mr. Florio, I see that you have not cut your microphone. You have a tendency to leave it on. I would appreciate if you're not speaking, shut it off. Because quite honestly, outside conversations, talking to Maggie, as much as we love her, we really don't want to hear her asking you any questions. And if I had a family here behind me that was asking me questions, I'd have to mute and take my laptop and go to a place where I wasn't going to be bothered. So I ask that all of us, mute our microphones if at all possible. I know that sometimes we forget. I forget myself. But I think it's a really good practice so that you don't have someone in the background confusing, you're supposed to be listening to the meeting and being engaged in the meeting as an elected official. And if other people are in the background talking, I think it can be very disconcerting to you because you're not paying attention, and to the public who, is listening to the meeting. So that being said, and last but not least, I think we run a very, I'll put quotes around well-behaved meeting compared to some other public bodies. I have never been witness on any of these meetings where I thought people were cruel or mean or whatever. They're always respectful. So I don't think I have to ask you to be respectful because I know you always are. And if in fact someone was disrespectful, I would hope that they could apologize. So that being said, I'm going to start like I always do and ask the committee if they have any comments, concerns about any of the features that have been disabled or any of the discussions so far. So that's Mr. Pearson. Would you like to speak?
Sure. No, good conversation. I'm actually, full disclosure, in the background working with Mr. Murphy, Mr. Levis, and a little bit talking about it with Mr. Wazika. Recording these meetings as we do the council meetings. If you watch a town council meeting recording, it's even a little more transparent because the people who are brought in for as a speaker or as a public comment, you can see them in the recording versus the way we're doing it, which again, it's going to require some further investigation in how we do it and how to do it like the town. But the way we do it, that's not the case. So, yep, we need to work on being more civil. We need to work on being more transparent. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Pearson. So, Mrs. Colonian.
I agree with disabling the chat because I found it very distracting myself, and sometimes some of the comments were uncalled for, and so I totally agree with that, and I do think that we're very civil compared to most. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Clooney, and Mr. Murray.
We're elected officials, right? So we always should be held to a higher standard. And that's the bottom line. And we should always view ourselves that way. We've earned the votes. We should we accepted the position. We accept the responsibility of position and the perception that goes with it. So, I manage a planning board and many other boards for the city. One of the conversations I've had with them is you should show up and act like you're going in front of the normal in-person meeting. That means, not showing up, no offense to any members here who might be in sweatpants and a t-shirt or anything else, but there's a presentation. If you wouldn't show up at a personal meeting with it, then you should show up, in professional, manner and conduct the same way. So I appreciate the comments. I actually, should have brought up the chat feature earlier because it's something that I have told my board members that we intentionally shut off. And I also, as the host, typically will mute people, even on the boards, if they don't mute themselves, because I do think that there's somebody walks across the room, background noise, whatever, nobody maybe wants to hear it, maybe inappropriate, whatever. So things happen. So I appreciate the fact that it's off. I think it's going to help us fulfill the intent of OMA. And and the last thing I'll say is I do appreciate the fact that in general, our committee has conducted ourselves very well overall. I think that we speak to each other in a civil manner. I actually like Zoom because I think the format where we sit in front of a crowd, talking to the crowd, as opposed to what it is intended to be, which is actually a meeting between us, that is just observed by the public. So we're not presenting to the public, we're presenting to each other and talking to each other, and this provides an equal format for that, which I guess is what Mr. Pearson is talking about on the recording of showing everybody in that format, which is an easy setting to do. So, but I want to thank everyone in the committee for setting a standard. I think, we've always been courteous. I think we just need to remind ourselves that we are being watched, and we also, just need to provide courtesy to each other. So I appreciate the topic and thank you for bringing it up, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Murray. And Mr. Florio.
Oh.
Mr. Florio, are you having technical difficulties? While we're waiting for Mr. Florio, oh, there you are. Okay, can you unmute yourself? Now that I asked you to mute yourself, now you're going to have fun unmuting yourself now.
Doing what she has to do, which is watching Jeopardy. I mean, that's how it is. I mean, she watches Jeopardy. I can't use the laptop because there's the sound. There's an issue with the sound. Hold on. Here we go. Because hey, Kathy, you're muted.
I know. I just wanted to say, do you have any comments about this topic?
Yeah. I try to be as civil as possible. I don't swear. I don't say nothing. Maggie watches Jeopardy and her shows, and it's quiet. So quiet and professional, Madam Chair. That's the word of the day. Quiet and professional. And that's what I will do, Madam Chair. And sometimes you can see what the problem is when I go over to mute myself with my iPhone. It sticks. But I use the Chromebook to read the agenda. because when I use the Chromebook and I use the paper agenda, it doesn't work. So I have to use the Chromebook so I can get the long agenda. So I have my own way of doing things here, Madam Chair. You know, we have it down to a science, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I do the best I can with the technology. And I behave myself. I try not to say anything other than to thank Maggie if she brings me a drink of water or something like that during the meeting. That's all. So thank you, and I will adhere to your request, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. And
I'm
before we go out to the public, I just wanted to thank Mr. Anderson for his advice and for giving me some good points on Zoom meetings and how we should conduct it. Because I mean, we kind of all were just thrown into this without a lot of direction. And so the fact that, you know, in fact, at RIASC, at one of our strategic planning meetings, I actually did bring up the fact that, you know, we should offer some Zoom training for school committees to say, you know, what are the best practices when you're Zooming in public? Because I do think that this will continue. I know we will definitely go back to in-public meetings, but we may be at this for a while. And so setting some ground rules, which we never really did, probably was an oversight. But again, we just got kind of thrown into it. So we did the best we could. So I appreciate everyone, you know, trying to follow the guidelines. And again, Mr. Anderson, if you have any other suggestions for Zoom meetings that we should adhere to, maybe we could, you know, have some bullets that we could put on a sheet and actually send out to the committee so that everyone is, you know, because you forget what, you know, was maybe discussed, but.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest too, the Rhode Island APA, the Planning Association for Rhode Island, had a lot of best practices discussions early on. And they have some videos and they have some guidance sheets. And I know Andy Tights and Amy Goins from Arcillo, Tights and Rich, which is a pretty well-known land use attorney, had provided guidance to planning boards. So that might be a good model for Mr. Anderson to look at and also, you know, maybe pick apart and use as part of that. So, or RIASC. So.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you, Mr. Murray. So before we move on, are there any attendees at the meeting that would like to raise their hand and make a comment?
There are no hands raised.
Yep, I don't see any. Okay, thank you, Mr. Murphy. Then I think we can go on to the next agenda item, which is number 10, which was sports, extracurricular activities, and self-funded activities discussion. I believe Mrs. Kalunian asked me to put this on the agenda. So if you'd like to lead us off, Mrs. Kalunian, that would be great.
Sure. I asked because I was receiving several emails from different parents and actually a coach too, asking if they could have clubs and extracurricular activities, you know, sports, if it was self-funded, if they, you know, had a booster club or something to that effect. And I told them that, you know, I would bring this to the committee for discussion on the meeting, so we can discuss that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Levis, did you want to start the conversation? I mean, I know that we have had sports that have been self-funded and people have raised money, but I'm not sure. I know it's always an equity problem. And so I'm glad Mr. Anderson is here.
Right.
And
I think
glad you're here.
I defer. I mean, you know, I have strong opinions. You know, I've always said that, you know, we need to fund education, a robust educational system, which includes clubs and sports and drama and all the arts. And, you know, as Mr. Murray says, I think, you know, the data is the data. And, you know, 992 people, despite what we've continuously presented in terms of our need and the reasoning and the rationale, 992 people supported that budget, which would have addressed our needs. The committee, the administration was consistent with what we wanted to put forward. I have a hard time, looking at some sports being able to be funded while others aren't. But again, I think Mr. Anderson's here. This is obviously a decision the committee can make. I think I've been clear about my feelings, and so I'd ask Mr. Anderson to talk about maybe some of the ground rules if we were going to move forward with this. What do we have to look like? I know Ms. Mangiarelli and I have had some conversations about some of the issues we've had in the past, working with, and again, we couldn't survive without the booster clubs and all the support that we have. We never could, even in our best of times. They're phenomenal. But there's still challenges in terms of money coming into central office and then dispersing funds. So I'll defer to Mr. Anderson initially.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Levis. Mr. Anderson, do you have any wage?
Yes, I do.
wise advice?
Let me give you some basic guidelines in terms of what you can and you can't do. First of all, you cannot have a pure pay-to-play system that occurs in other states. By a pay-to-play system, I'm talking about, I want to be on the golf team. If I want to be on the golf team, I have to pay $300. Even if we said, oh, well, we'll subsidize it, we'll have scholarships, we can't have a pay-to-play system. That's not legal in Rhode Island. Just like we can't, unlike Massachusetts, charge kids to ride on the school bus. We can't charge kids for textbooks. We can't charge kids for summer school in Rhode Island anymore. We cannot have a pay-to-play system. State law does, however, allow us to accept donations and use them in the school system. So how do you thread that needle? I'll give you an example in another district. For years, I don't know if they're doing it now, Collect Travel has paid for middle school soccer in Pawtucket. Collect Travel is located in Pawtucket. They are a very good corporate citizen. They pay for boys and girls soccer at all 3 middle schools. So there is not an equity issue. In other words, it doesn't make a difference if you're a boy or a girl. It doesn't make a difference if you went to Slater or to Jenks. Soccer is offered to boys and girls in all 3 middle schools. If the school committee were to accept donations, and again, the money has to flow through the school department for various financial control reasons that Ms. Mangiarelli has worked very hard to put in place and enforce in this district, and which is in turn required by our auditors. The money has to be any money that is collected has to be distributed on an equitable basis. And one of the biggest issues that comes up at the secondary level is equity between boys and girls. So if we had a boosters club that raised $50,000 for the boys tennis team, and another booster club that only raised $500 for the girls tennis team, the school committee, which oversees the tennis program, would be responsible and held liable for a Title IX violation. And what is Title IX? Title IX is the federal law that applies to the Coventry Public Schools, because we accept federal funds, that says that we have to make resources available regardless of gender. So we can't have a situation that happened in one school district 25 years ago where the school committee bought brand new uniforms for the boys basketball team and told the girls basketball team to go sell chocolates if they wanted a uniform. The law requires that spending that resources, and resources include field time, coaching salaries, travel and travel expenditures, rosters, that they are comparable for both girls and boys. So if somebody wanted to donate money to the Coventry Public Schools to support athletics, it would be necessary for either the administration or the school committee, and frankly, if I was on the school committee, I would defer to the administration, to make sure that that money was spent in an equitable manner in terms of gender. Similarly, if somebody were to offer you money to say, I want to fund the chess club at Hopkins Hill, I would hope that we would find ways to have equivalent opportunities for children at Weston Coventry and Black Rock and Washington Oak and Tyoke. Sorting that out is, in the first instance, the responsibility of the administration. What you can't do, or what I will strongly recommend and publicly recommend that you can't do, is to say, oh, the boys tennis team boosters have raised $50,000. We're going to take that's wonderful. Thank you for the donation. The boys tennis team is going to go to practice in Florida over Christmas break, and we're going to, give them the best court times after school and so forth, because their booster club raised so much money. That you can't do. So those are sort of the parameters that you need to think about in terms of somebody donating money. Again, I think it's wonderful. I don't know if Colette is still doing it. They've done it for many years, but they are very careful, and the Pawtucket School Department is very careful that the opportunities for boys and girls, regardless of what neighborhood you live in, to play soccer are equal.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. That was very helpful. I don't know if the committee wants to talk about it. Mr. Pearson, did you have any comments about this particular issue?
I'm not sure if I have comments at this time, because really this is just informational, and I don't think anything's been proposed on paper for a way forward until, of course, we have a budget that passes in town. So no comments yet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian, did you want it to?
I just,
You know-
I actually, like I said, I got 2 emails, and one of them was from a coach. He's a coach of hockey, and they have a booster club. And that's what he was, he says, oh, we have a booster club. Can we pay for hockey? So I told him that I would bring this forward to the committee. So, and I'm glad that Mr. Anderson weighed in. It really was helpful to hear the perimeters around that, because I wasn't really sure. And I didn't want to, give any answers. I think it's something that we should, as a committee, think about, talk it out and discuss and everything. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Murray.
Thank you. One of my sayings is you open this can of worms, so let's go fishing, right? And we kind of opened this can of worms with the budget and everything coming down. I had a Facebook Live event last week, just informational, but some of the questions I was getting as well, along with Ms. Colonian, is what's going on with sports? Can we fundraise? Can we pay to play? And I wanted to get back to them. So I did some of my own research, and I did, so the committee knows I did ask the administration, based on my research that I had done, was I correct? Pay to play was not, not authorized. What I found is there's no legislative authority given to the school committees from the legislature to implement a pay to play scenario. So it came down to write in several opinions. The last one, I believe, was 09 by Commissioner Gist, which essentially said it's a no, and she opines in a 5-page document about why. And so, and I understand why. I agree with some of it. Maybe I don't, but it doesn't matter, right? So there's no pay to play. I do think there is, we have to, from my opinion, accept the possibility that we need to figure out a way for parents who want to support sports or other activities, give them an outlet to be able to do that. Some of this community didn't support the budget, and I'm sorry for that. But sports are very specific, activities are very specific activities for certain children in our district. I'd hate to see that parents don't have the opportunity or a venue to be able to move that forward, because we're basically kneecapping them. We're saying, well, you can't fundraise it, and all you can do is go out and vote for this budget and advocate for the budget and force your neighbor to go out and vote. It's an uphill battle, we know, and it's a larger issue. A lot of people voted against the budget for a lot of different reasons. And it wasn't just for sports. It wasn't just because they wanted to not have sports. Had to do with personal situations, had to do with community dynamics, the image right now, we all know, right? So I do think what would be helpful from the booster side, though, is obviously administration would need help on this. And one of the things that Ms. Mangiarelli brought up is that we've fronted in the past funds for purchases, and then the booster clubs are slow to catch up on those donations. And that can't happen. I think that needs to be a policy thing set by the school committee, update the current policy to ensure that doesn't happen. I also think that, the booster clubs, in talking to the assistant athletic director for the high school, it became apparent there's no overriding booster club authority. So just like Ms. Patnode, you talked about PTAs and PTOs, there used to be a governance model. There's nobody in charge of all the boosters sort of coordinating everybody and ensuring, let's say for Title IX, that there's an equitable raising of funds and distribution of funds to the district. And I don't believe that necessarily should all fall on Ms. Mangiarelli or the administration. So if parents want to get together, we have some great boosters, and start coordinating a little bit better, I think would be extremely helpful if they want to move forward with that model. So from that standpoint, if they want to be more organized, the adherence to Title IX, I pulled up our policy on athletic donations, and it states that the adherence to Title IX is basically on the shoulders of the athletic director, which I'm not sure is the best place to be. And this is a 2010 policy. The donations legislation came out in 2009. So I'm guessing that this came out shortly thereafter and was the first attempt to create a framework. But perhaps the policy committee could revisit this and really put it through a fine-tooth comb to figure out, a better way to vet Title IX and figure out these donations. So from my standpoint, I never want to tell a parent, I can't provide a way for you to support the district. We need all the help we can get. I want a budget to pass. I want more funding. But the truth is, we're kind of in this scenario and we may not get out of it. We all know that the pre-COVID budget didn't get authorized. It may never come back. So for sports to come back next year, I don't know where we're going to be. But if we at least have a venue, I feel really bad if, boys and girls tennis goes forward and football does not, or another sport does not. But telling a parent who has the opportunity for their child to do something because they worked really hard to raise the money, that they just can't do it. If we don't accept everything, we do nothing. I just think that's a little bit contrary to what we're promoting here is community togetherness. We're asking people to go out there and fight for themselves. We asked the students in this last round, go out and fight for the district, and they raised $25,000. And we did do this already, but we made sure it was equitable between the sports. So I know that's a long diatribe, but I do think, just some takeaways, potential update of the policy, supporting Ms. Mangiarelli and her request that, the money comes first and the purchases come second. And then the booster clubs, and for the parents out there who are interested in this, and I encourage them to engage tonight, but they need to get together in a framework that works with the district a little bit better. Maybe not the onesie twosies. We need an overriding governance that kind of helps with the communication and ensuring we meet Title IX. So, and I will leave it there, and thank you for the time.
Madam Chair, may I jump in real quick just for a brief comment?
Sure.
I'd like to echo what Mr. Murray was saying. It's actually been, as the policy subcommittee over the years, it's been years now, has been discussing things on our radar. This issue has come up in the past. Never really has gotten on an agenda because I don't think we had a clear vision of the path forward on how to deal with Booster Club donations and ensure that things are equal amongst our sports for Title IX compliance. However, that said, it's never too late to try and get it back on the radar. My only word of concern, caution is that if the entire school committee is not on board with that initiative, then I'm not going to spin my wheels on it, because the risk with our booster clubs is it becomes very territorial. A booster club for one sports organization, feels like they're competing against a booster club for another sports or even an activity organization. Bringing them together is a challenging task. I think it can be done, but it's a challenging task that requires everyone to be on the same page. So if everyone's not on the same page, then it's almost not worth the effort, because instead of bringing people together, you risk creating a lot of animosity and fighting, figuratively between the groups. That's my only word of caution. So great idea, Mr. Murray, and maybe that's something we can get back on an agenda at some point.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mr. Florio?
Okay. Mrs. Coolian, thank you for bringing this up. For the last, 6 years, we've always discussed girls hockey, and we've always tried to give some money to girls hockey because it's Title IX sport, and we have a lot of young women who do exceptionally well at girls hockey. And I'm glad we're talking about it now, because it usually comes up in a couple of months when the hockey season gets going. I know the athletic director, Chuck Jones, he's had issues with this for a long time because there's no clear policy on it. And we have been giving money to the girls hockey team for a while. And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have a girls hockey team. As a matter of fact, they play with another school district, which is what Exeter West Greenwich does with West Warwick. They won the championship last year. So it's an interesting question, and I think it's one that at some point we are going to have to take up as a school committee. And Mrs. Coolian, thank you for bringing this up, because it's an issue, and we haven't resolved it in the time I've been on it, and I don't think you've resolved it on the time that you've been on it either, Madam Chair. And it keeps raising its head, and I think at some point we're going to have to do something about this. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Florio. Yes, obviously this has been raised multiple times since I've been on school committee. The only way that I think it could ever work, and I believe, Mr. Levis, you tried and attempted to do this, but it kind of fell apart. The only way I think that raising money with booster clubs that ultimately take the pot of money that they've raised can be equitably distributed across all sports is to have some kind of booster foundation that basically agrees to come together, raise money for sports, all sports, not just for football, or not just for hockey or for basketball or soccer. It has to be just a fundraising effort. And it can be obviously a nonprofit. It can be a 501c3 organization with a board of directors. But the parents involved will have to believe that that's the way they want to go. And they're going to have to give up their control that says, well, hey, my parents are all willing to go crazy and raise, X amount of dollars because we all love football. But maybe the tennis parents, don't feel that passionate, but they support their kids playing tennis, but maybe they're not willing to go out and fundraise. So that's the problem I see. And it does become a real sticky situation if one booster club raises all kinds of funds and another doesn't. And how do you make it equitable across and adhere to Title IX? So I think the school committee can discuss the issue. I mean, we're always willing to take donations in, but it can't be for a particular sport because it could potentially cause really, really major problems. It has to be looked at by the administration if they're the board sort of looking at it, and or a private board. I mean, there are education foundations, for example, in Barrington. They raise money. They're a nonprofit, and they raise it for lots of different reasons. No particular reason in the sense that they're going to fund a playground or fund, a school project with folks. They just raise the money, and then projects are brought to them, and the board makes the decision as to how the money's going to be spent. And booster clubs have a huge impact on sports, and some sports are more, there's more people in the community that are willing to support certain sports over other sports. So to try to make it equitable is a major issue. And unless the group of parents that presently are in booster clubs right now are willing to come together and raise money as a group for all sports and all kids, girls and boys, whatever, I think it'll be difficult for someone to say, we definitely want girls hockey, and we're going to raise the money, and it only can be used for girls hockey. Because ultimately the school department and the school committee is responsible for making things equitable. And to do that can be a really tricky situation. So we don't want to discourage fundraising. I get that. But at the same time, you can't fundraise and then say, I'm going to pay for the coach salary in football because we raised enough money to do that. And that's not a reason for it not to run. And we're also raising all the money for equipment. And so football will run, but then maybe girls soccer or boys soccer won't because those parents haven't come together and raised enough money. We just can't do that. So we can, as a group, raise money for the equal distribution across all sports that happen to be maybe going to run. But that's a lot of money. I mean, let's face it, it's a lot of money to actually raise that money every single year. So it really does come down to the school budget being funded by the taxpayers of the town. And booster clubs were never meant to fund sports. They were meant to fund those extra things that, school departments didn't have money for anymore. Years and years ago, people didn't raise money for jackets for football players or tennis players or soccer players. That equipment, all those kinds of extras that the booster clubs raise money for now were funded by the school department. Playgrounds, PTAs and PTOs all over the state raise money for cultural arts, for playgrounds. That's because funding has, not funding public funds have not supported those things. So parents have stepped up to try to raise money. And so, it's a difficult question and difficult issue. And unless people are willing to actually come together and not be territorial over their particular sport, raise money as just a group and leave it to the school department to distribute that money, I don't see a way for it to really work otherwise. But Mr. Murray?
More of a question, and maybe Craig and Sarah can answer this. I mean, who right now, or maybe Don Coward, is ensuring equity between the booster clubs as it is? Because we're setting a baseline budget. But we have some active boosters more than others, and that money gets filtered in. And I know we've spent money on equipment and other purchases and things. So is that offsetting our budget? And is it offset equally between boys and girls as it sits now?
Right, and I just want to be clear, not all booster money filters through. And actually, when I first got here, that was a concerted effort that I took because we had a lot of booster clubs that were actually using our tax ID number, which is it was a huge issue. So I definitely don't see everything that booster clubs purchase. My point was that there have been purchases that have come through, and I would say pretty regularly throughout, the different sports, that they have then reimbursed. So they purchased through us and then they reimbursed us. So it was more the purchasing mechanism. My point was that there have been numerous times where booster clubs never reimbursed. So they were always, we ordered on their behalf, and the intent was always that they were supposed to be the ones funding that, and we had to chase down funds or not collect funds, and then ultimately we have to end up eating that. But I definitely don't, I want to be clear that all booster money is not flowing through us. So I don't know half of what booster clubs spend their money on.
And we started, when I first was here as the assistant, one of my first responsibility, well, not responsibility, but I tried to pull people together. There was a lot of transition, tracking down the names. Patty Martin was very helpful to me. I worked with Chuck Jones and Joe Fagnoli. But we ended up shifting that to trying to clean up. Like I said, Sarah had indicated there was many booster clubs that were using our tax ID number, and which they shouldn't have been doing. And there was a lot of resentment. The school department had allowed a lot of self-funding, but when I came on board and I met with anybody that wanted to meet with me, they were concerned about, why are we paying for this? Why aren't we paying for the coaches? One of the things that we did is we made sure we funded all the coaches moving forward. And the other part is, I don't want to own the booster clubs. I mean, we've had this conversation with Mr. Anderson, with the PTAs. We had to make sure that our principals weren't on their boards. So while, making sure, ensuring Title IX that it's equitable, the other part is that I don't want to take this on. And the bigger, not argument, but the bigger conversation is, as Ms. Patno said, it is about the budget. I mean, our Chromebooks are going to fail us miserably. We didn't purchase others. What about all the little clubs that may have 5 or 6 kids in it? So I think, we took a hard line. The committee took a hard line, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for athletics. I say that all the time. But we really do need to find a way to get this community to support education, because we'll be faced with, you remember last year and the layoffs and everything we faced. If we can't figure out how we're going to move forward by adding to our base this year, next year is going to be horrific. I don't even know what that's going to look like. And so, while I understand having a conversation tonight, and as Mr. Pearson says, just a discussion, no decisions are being made, but we need to step back and look at the big picture and try to find a way to once again support education for the community and for our youth. And I think that's really where our conversation, and obviously not tonight, but as we move forward, because obviously 992 votes, says a lot, and we really need to figure that out. So while I appreciate the conversation, I know that as a school department, I don't want to own the booster clubs. I'm not going to put that on Sarah. We just can't take that on. So if the community chooses to, as we're talking, Mr. Murray, about communication and figuring out, can we get a grassroots or a community-based organization help support that? We can be part of that, but I really feel this is something the community is going to have to look at, and we're going to need Mr. Anderson's guidance throughout to make sure that, because when Mr. Anderson and I spoke, it's pretty much they can raise the money, they give it to us. We have to make sure it's distributed equitably. But therein lies the problem, because as it stands now, it is very territorial. People care about their sport. And so it sounds good, but I don't know how we come from concept to reality. I think there's going to be a lot of dialogue, and I'd be interested to see what this policy, if we go that route, what that even looks like. Because we have to protect ourselves from the booster clubs. We can't own what transpires at that level.
And I'm not suggesting that we do own it. I think what I'm suggesting is providing a clear, what we're hearing tonight is that this topic has come up over and over and over again. And there's a lack of clarity on everyone's part on what's allowable, what's not allowable, what the policy is. I'm looking at our policy right now. The policy says that if it's donated, it's supposed to go through the athletic director for Title IX, then it's supposed to come to the school committee to accept or deny it. I don't remember accepting or denying any of these in my tenure, and although I'm very short here, but I don't know if we're following that policy as it sits. So I think it just needs to be revisited. And if we we decide, listen, I understand not owning it. I'm not asking the administration to own another thing at all. But I do think that I need to be clear with the constituents that I represent and say, if you want to do this, you're either can or can't do it. And if you want to do it, this is the path you'd have to go on. And we're not doing it. You have to do it. And I understand you're a parent and you don't want to do this and you disagree that, well, you can do two things. You can go out and advocate for the budget, or in the short term, you can go raise funds for your child, but it's got to be done in a certain way. And I just want to have clarity in process and a clear answer to people moving forward. I know it's said over and over, people need to support the budget. But there's only a certain contingent in this community that have children with sports, and I'm assuming many of them vote. Maybe some of them don't. But there's many, many other registered voters in the community. So I don't want this to always come down to a budget supporting discussion. I think we're full aware that the community needs that. But I also don't want to push parents away because once again, we're seen as the bad guys saying, we don't know and we don't care. We just want you to go out and vote for the budget. That doesn't say community collaboration to me as a parent. Providing pathways where they can assist. And there's a lot of parents who have reached out to me in the past week alone who said, I want to help. I voted for the budget, but I want to help in other ways. So beyond going door to door and canvassing and telling them to go, hopefully if another budget comes up, what can they do? I want to be clear on if you want to move forward and if you want to try to help our community, this is another way to do it. And that's all I'm asking for tonight is to, revisit the policy and figure something out with this.
I just want to say, Kathy, something happened with her internet. She's trying to call in now. So, but just wanted to let everybody know.
Dave, did you want to take over as the co-chair?
Yeah, Dave, you have to
I'm done
take
with my
over.
spiel.
You have to take over. Kathy can't get back in. You got to
You're
unmute.
muted, Dave.
There we go.
Hello.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi. Sorry, I've completely lost internet, so I'm on my phone. But I can't see anybody. So, are you doing the meeting, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I'll just listen. How's that?
Very good, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Mr. Murray, do you want to continue?
No, I think I've said my piece. And unfortunately, Kathy didn't hear it. But Kathy, the boil down was, I'm asking to really just look at the policies we have, not necessarily put it on the administration, but create a framework where it's very clear to the parents and public on what the process would be.
Okay, that makes sense.
Madam Chair, if I might make another quick comment,
Mr. Pearson, you're recognized.
or Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Dave.
No problem.
Kathy. Yeah, I will caution that a policy revision here is not a panacea for exactly what you're looking for. There's a lot of, we're going to rely heavily on the advice of counsel if we do anything, because there's a lot of legal loopholes around this. And to Craig's point that he made earlier, it's not our job to wrangle in these booster clubs. They're individual private organizations. They're not public organizations that we have any oversight or control over. So the best we can do is put some policies in place that as you said, try to build a framework of how they can work with us. But, this act of Kathy mentioned of building a booster federation or a one booster club for all Coventry, she's right. It would be great if that would happen, but as I mentioned in my previous comment, I think there's a lot of silos, a lot of territorialism. Getting everyone to work as one would be a tremendous task. And I don't believe it's our task, nor our administrators' task to do that. We have to be careful when dealing with these outside organizations. It's the same with the PTAs. They're not part of the school department. We want to work with them. We need their help. We can guide them on how best to work with us, but we can't tell them what to do. So I would just caution that, revising the policies won't fix this. It'll help, might help. I won't even say it will help. It might help, but it's not going to change greatly the relationship we have there. There's state law we have to contend with. And again, how do you deal with any kind of donation that comes to the Coventry School Department is at play here. Sorry. So it's something we definitely should do. So I'm not saying we're not looking at the policy. I think we should look at the policies, but Mr. Anderson's on, and we're going to lean on him heavily for how to guide us through this minefield of laws and making sure we don't try to take responsibility for things that we're not supposed to, because it creates legal liabilities. That's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pearson. Nothing to be sorry about. That was excellent input. Mrs. Koulian, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Mrs. Koulian, since you wanted this on the agenda?
I agree that, we have to look at some things and decide what to do. I also agree that this should not be put on the administration and Sarah. I think that, and as Mr. Levis said, we have to, the community has to step up and start funding education. I mean, that's the bottom line. But we need to look at this. Mm-hmm. I agree that, it's something we need to look at. But I also agree that it's not something that should be put on the backs of our administrators.
Oh, Mrs. Koulian, thank you very much for bringing this up, because a lot of people over the years have expressed interest in us giving money to booster clubs over the years. And sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. And when they don't, they get very angry. So we have to make a concerted effort, like Mr. Pearson and Mr. Murray said, I'm just trying to wrap this up, to bring everyone to the table and distribute the money equitably. And I think Mr. Pearson is right. It's going to be a very hard and long process to do that, because they have to understand education comes first. And then the clubs and the sports come into play. But we're going to have to get out of this pandemic first, I think, with the vaccine coming, before we can really have a hard discussion on this. Do you agree, Mrs. Koulian? Donna?
I agree, Dave.
Okay.
I think with the pandemic and everything, we can't really play sports anyway. We can't, right. So I do agree we have to get out of this first.
So I guess let's just be patient. And with Mr. Pearson on the panel that looks at the policies, and Mr. Murray and myself and Kathy with all of her experience, I think you can give the individuals hope that reached out to you. Okay.
Dave, we have a couple of hands up.
Sure.
All right, Anthony, you're up first. If you could just state your name and address for the record and unmute your microphone.
Anthony Carpinello, 28 Westview Drive. First, you know, I've spoke at these a number of times. I've been very, very supportive of the school committee. I've been to the rallies. I've been trying to do things. I don't even want to get into all of what you had just spoken about, trying to get money. Where do we get the money? What I'm asking tonight, you may not understand. The Rhode Island Interscholastic League has rules about kids who transfer, and I'm going to be honest. You have kids who are transferring, especially juniors and seniors, because they are in the middle of trying to get a sports scholarship and need to play their senior season. So if they were to transfer to a school that has a sport that Coventry is not offering, it can play no penalty. But the RIIL needs to be notified. So I'd have a, I'm sorry, but a decision needs to be made. We cannot sit here and wait. Now, there's a little bit of a leeway because they were pushed back into January. But this plan of hope is not a plan, okay? Because if student transfers from school A to school B and played in a varsity sport at school A, and there's no sports at that school, so he goes to school B, but then school A decides we're going to have the sport. Now he's going to be penalized and going to be ineligible for half the season. And with basketball around the corner, you have a number of kids who this is too. So now if basketball, as of right now, is pushed back to January 11th, and Coventry decides, well, we're not going to decide about sports until mid-January. Well, they can't practice because right now it's not in the budget. And then it's finally put down, no sports, it's official, etc. Now that student who needs to play in order to promote himself for a scholarship, he's stuck at a school that doesn't offer the sport. He has to find a school that has the sport, and go through all of the, getting ready for it, etc. By the time he's acclimated with the school, with the team, etc., he's already behind the 8 ball. So decisions need to be made. That at least the RIL, they need to be told. Look, I fully get it. Again, I don't want to get into the funding, etc. I listened to Luke. I understand fully. Look, it's going to be very, very hard to have sports, etc. I fully get that. I accept that. What we need to do is move on for this year, regardless if it's the spring or the winter sports or the fall. Or the spring. I'm sorry, winter or spring. We need to move forward so these kids can make their make their plans, what they want to do, because there are seniors who are willing to transfer for their second semester of their senior year. And it's a fact. And by Coventry waiting to make a decision, you're leaving this kid in greater limbo than it is. And like I said, this all may be moot because of the COVID. So the seniors are out of play, but think about the juniors.
Mm-hmm.
A decision needs to be made, and it's terrible. I fully understand. I fully support. My wife's, she runs the booster club. I run around town trying to help. I get all that. I just ask that the town, whomever it has to be, school, township committee, that a decision be made for this year so our kids can move on.
Anthony, can you hold on a minute?
Sure.
Mr. Levis, can you offer anything to Anthony?
Dave, the school committee, we passed a budget that doesn't include sports. Now, if the budget, if the new council puts forward a budget and voted, and then we'll make a decision. But, like I said, I hear his pain. I know Anthony very well and the effort, but, for me, this is not political, right? This is just our reality. I think it's horrific. And like I said, the conversation tonight isn't about notifying the Interscholastic League. The conversation was about the booster. I understand what Mr. Campanello is discussing. And we know, while there are kids that, like he said, that are looking for scholarships, we have other kids that just want to play. And we're in conversation with the Interscholastic League. That's all I can say is that, but tonight's conversation is about, in terms of booster, and I think the topic was
Booster clubs.
Self-funded activities discussion. So I think that's where we've got to stay, but I fully understand what he's discussing, what he's saying.
Okay. So, Anthony, it looks like we're going to have to wait to discuss with the new council a budget. Are you still there, Anthony?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Yes, no, I'm here. I fully understand. I just wanted the committee to know that I wouldn't expect an answer right away, but I just wanted to make everybody aware of what the rules are for eligibility, so that we can make a decision sooner than later. I'm not saying tonight, next week, but sooner than later.
Okay. Anthony, we'll do our best.
Thank you very much.
That's all I can. That will
Thank
do
you
our.
very much. I fully understand your situation. I don't envy you. You're in a bad predicament, and but I thank you for your efforts, and thank you for your time and consideration.
And thank you for your involvement with children. It's very much appreciated. I hope your son goes to a great school too. Whatever we can do, we will try to help him. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, up next is Jen. Jen, if you could unmute your microphone and state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, hi, Jen Marzalek, 7 Tamarack Trail. I just wanted to say, as one of the Booster Club presidents for a 3-season sport, that I'm happy that maybe a sort of a conversation into the direction that we certainly don't want to be pitting sports against one another, because there is no one sport more deserving than another right now. Girls, boys, I mean, my son runs year round, but he's certainly not more deserving than the golf team or the basketball player or the tennis player. So when we raised some funds in the fall, it was for all the approved fall sports that were recognized as sports by the Coventry district. And, that's what we did. And some of our sports were able to finish their seasons and some were not, but those funds were to go equitably for those approved sports. That being said, I'm almost on my way out of the boosters right now, but I think that one big, large booster club for Coventry, being the size of our school, would be something to be great to be looked into in the future. I know North Kingstown does it. They're extremely successful with it, and everything's run like a well-oiled machine over there. So I know Mr. Levis we've even discussed that in the past. It would be, something hopefully that, given all this has happened this year, that Coventry could look at into the future. That being said, if any booster club parents are on, presidents, board members, whatever, we can certainly all come and work together. There are, a lot of businesses and corporations and stuff that are in this town that certainly are willing to step up and support our kids. In the very short time we had before, we saw tremendous community support. So I'm not sure what's happening this winter. I know the governor's saying that there is hope for sports. With these numbers, I'm not even thinking as a a parent in good conscience putting my kid in a building with the numbers like this inside, huffing, puffing, strong breath going, if that's even a good idea at this point. But we'll see what the next few weeks bring with COVID. But certainly thinking forward to the spring, a spring season is certainly a possibility, moving outdoors, banding together, raising funds together. But all sports, all these kids deserve a chance. And we certainly don't want to divide this community any more than we already have.
Hey, Jen,
Yes.
who's your council? You know?
Currently it's Deb, but it will be Kim.
Okay. How about you? Oh, so your school committee member, your school committee representative is James Pearson.
Correct.
You have anything you want to address with James? James, do you want to talk to Jen?
Jen and I, Mrs. Marzalek and I have been communicating over email in the past, and I would be happy to speak with her. She can call me or email me anytime.
Oh, very good. Thank you, James. And Jen, I will do the best we can.
I know this is a tough year. Hopefully, it's the toughest we ever have to experience.
I hope so too, Jen. To be honest with you, I hope I never see this again. I hope we can unite as a community and win.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Jen. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pearson.
Okay, Josh, you're up next. If you could state your name and address for the record and unmute your microphone.
Josh Clements, 10 Gentry Farm Drive. Appreciate the ideas, the teamwork, and the booster clubs come together. I think that'd be a great idea. I know having to listen to the last several months of these school committee meetings, sports budgeting has been a large topic. And it would be beneficial, I think, in the future to be able to focus on the education aspect, respecting and understanding the benefits that sports makes to the school community. And I guess on the topic of Title IX, my question would be, in the past, I had thought that ratio of spending was on a per student basis, not necessarily sports, tennis, men's tennis to women's tennis, like boys football is balanced with what? So I don't know if there's just more female athletes or more opportunities, such as the women's ice hockey. I think that's a great opportunity to expand opportunities for girls in sports and balance out that spending concern.
Well,
no further comment.
Well, Josh, I'm going to transfer you. I believe Mrs. Patnode's back. And Mrs. Patnode, are you aware of what the conversation we're having? Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Florio.
There you go. Let me mute my.
Your sound's off, Kath.
Oh, it is?
No,
now it is.
Oh, are we okay? Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yep.
All right, so I was going to ask Mr. Anderson to weigh in on this because I think he's probably the expert.
Sure. There's lots of questions and there's lots of arguments, and it keeps lawyers very busy in terms of, do you look at per pupil? Do you look at opportunities and so forth? I'm not going to be able to tell you here which is the exact measurement. I do know, however, that when you tell the boys team you've got new uniforms and you tell the girls team that they have to sell chocolates, that's going to be a problem. This is not a problem unique to Coventry. I am wrestling in another district with a football group that wants brand new everything every year, every season, multiple jerseys, for the football team, and the rest of the athletic program in the district can fall by the wayside. I think that I believe her name was Ms. Marzalek, in terms of raising money for the group and working for the community good. The way it was described to me that they did it this fall is a real role model in terms of the way this can be done. But it takes leadership. It takes leadership, the type of leadership she provided in the community this fall. She's a community leader. I understand from what she said that her children are finishing up in the schools, but there needs to be somebody who's got kids and a ways to go who is willing to lead. Because I want to make it very clear that the school department, I'm not recommending to the school department that they refuse donations. I'm saying to the school department that if you accept donations, that you have to make sure that they're distributed equitably. Just like if somebody said to you, we'd love to give you a $50,000 scholarship, but it can only go to white children. Or, you know, the school committee would say, no, thank you, we're not going to accept that. That's not right. Similarly, we can't accept $30,000 for a boys football program and then not have something comparable. And I will again say defining comparable is getting into the weeds. I'm not going to on this call, but we have to have something comparable in place in terms of opportunities for girls.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any further comments, Josh?
No, I appreciate the feedback. I guess, you know, it comes back to the threat of budget and budgeting within the town. And I guess I'd ask those listening to consider budgeting within the state. And there's an opportunity this weekend to protest Gina Raimondo's austerity budget and the cuts to education and healthcare in the state. So, you know, check out Reclaim Rhode Island, write a letter to your representative. And if we get a state budget passed, that can support the town in better ways and education across the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Mr. Murphy, one more hand up.
Yes, Mrs. Benzo, it's your turn. If you could state your full name and address for the record and unmute your microphone.
Hi, my name is Ann Benzo. I live at 30 Sugar Maple Drive. And I tried to get on the last question, but I wasn't able to when we were talking about the transparency issues and how people have to unmute and do different things. I just have a question about Mr. Florio, because, or I'm sorry, not Mr. Florio, Mr. Pearson. It doesn't look like he's on the meeting. I can't see him on my screen, but I hear his voice and I want to know where he is. That's my question. I kept thinking, okay, he's gone, but then his voice is there. And I'm just worried, why can't I see him? Because you're talking about transparency, but I don't see him. And he is my representative. I want to see him. I'm sorry, that's not about sports, but this is something that I'm concerned about.
I can't answer that, Mrs. Benzo. I think only Mr. Pearson. I don't know if there's something wrong with his camera or he just has shut off his video feed.
Okay.
If he wants to respond, he may. But Mr. Pearson, did you want to respond to that in any way?
Yeah, I'm having camera difficulties today. Hope to have it fixed by the next meeting. My apology.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mrs. Benzo.
Thank you.
Okay, Tina, you're up next. If you could unmute your microphone and state your full name and address for the record.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Tina Canisat, 1 South Pond Drive. I am the current president of the Coventry Hockey Booster Club. I want to start by thanking Ms. Kalunian for putting this item on the agenda. I was the other email that she referred to when she introduced this topic. So again, thank you, Donna, for your response and willingness to put this on the agenda tonight. I think it's going to be quite obvious where I stand in this issue. I obviously am hoping that you will support booster clubs and self-funding for sports, especially this year. I do understand all the concerns that were brought up this evening. Again, I am no way advocating for one sport to be funded over another. I think all are important and all children have a right and should be able to play. Speaking from the hockey perspective, we currently have the money to fund our sport. This wouldn't be about going out and raising future donations and fundraising, which again, I would be more than happy, and I know my parents would be more than happy to do to help continue to fund hockey and other sports as well. I have a very supportive group of parents, and I know that they would not only support hockey, but would support all other sports as well. So again, I do like the idea of coming together possibly in the future and creating one booster club and all parents working together. I very much agree with Jen. We should not be separated. We should not be divided. There's already too much of that in this town and in this nation. What I'm asking specifically tonight, again, is for this to continue to be a discussion, maybe not a decision being made tonight, but I do feel as though it needs to be made quickly. Winter sports are coming up. I know that they've been pushed back. I know there's the fear of COVID and them not running, but right now they are. And right now you have boys and girls waiting to know if they can play. And you have parents in this community that are willing to support them. You did this in the fall. You allowed fall sports to go forward with the donations. I'm asking for the same consideration for winter and spring sports as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tina. We appreciate your comments. Any more hands, Mr.? I think I see one more, Mr. Murphy.
Okay, Timothy, you're up next. If you could unmute your microphone and state your name and address for the record.
All right, it's Timothy Veazey and Melissa Lipa, 75 Highwood Drive. And I have been the Booster Club treasurer for middle school cross country since my students were in 8th grade. They're now juniors and seniors in the high school, but somehow I'm still the Booster Club person in charge of that. And I just wanted you to know that we donated $4,000 of the middle school cross country money to all sports, to have all sports run in the fall. And that was a choice from, the cross country people, the cross country coach, all of them. We were all about all sports. So we want to make sure that winter sports happen, that spring sports happens. My son's a wrestler. My daughter's a pole vaulter. My son's a baseball player. And we've been really, really wrestling with the idea of not having them to be able to participate in these sports. They're outstanding students, but it's also another big part for them to be able to have that, and just struggling with the fact that Coventry is not going to have that is very difficult decisions that we thinking of making. And really, really don't want to do that. I've been Coventry through and through my whole life. Went to school. We both went to school in Coventry, and we wanted our kids to come here as well. So we really support that we have that sports, that these kids know that it's going to run. I mean, I don't understand why we're the only town that you're hearing that this is happening with.
Thank you for your comments. I'm not sure any other town hasn't passed their FY21 budget yet. So until we have passed that, we're sort of in a predicament. So we're hopeful that the new town council will put forward a new budget and we will find the money to support the things that we really need to support. So until that happens, we're kind of locked in by the amount of money that we have. But I thank you for your comments.
Okay, up next is Ted. If you could just unmute your microphone, state your full name and address for the record, please.
Ted Tracy, 25 Sonia Drive. And I'm a big supporter of athletics. I have helped them since I was a student there. I still volunteer from time to time. But the thing that bothers me is right now, the discussion is self-funding to just get the teams on the field. Where, the Booster Club is great, but just the basics has always been a responsibility of the community as a whole. And the question is, right now, the funding from the community to fund sports is not coming. And I fear that if we start taking private donations, even if it's done at the highest level as equitable as possible, the community will say, see, we don't need to raise everyone's taxes to fund sports because just the people that want sports will do it themselves. And eventually that could run out and we could be in a bigger hole. So I just want to hear the committee's response to that part of it.
Thanks, Ted. I agree. That's always been a problem. If the community just funds one particular thing, then, you know, the rest of the community might think, well, hey, we don't need to do X, Y, Z. And I agree. All of Coventry, the citizens who live here should support schools, and supporting schools means the whole child, not just academics. It also means clubs, activities, intramural sports, regular sports, all of that goes under our umbrella. So again, I agree with what you're saying. And I know that there was that talk when PTAs first came on and started funding things that really the school department should have funded. And it becomes a given now that PTAs are going to raise money to do extracurricular events for kids in our schools, and all kinds of other things that typically school departments paid for in the past. So it is a problem. It's an ongoing problem. And, you know, hopefully we'll be able to find a new budget and get enough funding to actually do what we have to do. But I can't really answer what's going to happen. We'll see what happens. So I thank you for your comments, Ted.
Kathy, if I may.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Murray, go ahead.
I also wanted to add, you know, I don't think we're advocating in the discussion tonight is really to supplant long-term having private funding for sports. I don't think any of us is advocating for that. What I've talked about is a process whereby, given the current circumstance, that there's an opportunity for parents, booster clubs, others to potentially contribute, find a path forward to make this year work. Obviously, you know, I can't speak for the rest of the committee. I know for myself, and Ms. Patton has iterated, that we feel it's part of the basic education program, that it needs to be part of the budget, that it needs to be a commitment by the town as part of our core education system. And we all realize the value that sports bring to the table. But the fact of the matter is right now, even in the best case scenario, running out the timelines, just logically, we're not going to, even if the new council decides to pass a budget and bring it to the town again, we're looking at February. And that's a real timeline. So, you know, finding ways where parents who are asking us, can we do something? I think we need to discuss it. But your point is well taken. I think, you know, none of us wants to see this a long-term solution for our town. We need to get to a place, I've said it over and over again, sustainability, where we're not having to talk about what do we cut every year. It's what are we funding every year and how do we grow and succeed? And I'm hoping we can get to that place soon. But right now, we're having these tough discussions. So I appreciate the comment, though.
Thank you, Luke.
Okay, thank you for all the attendee comments. Mr. Murphy, I don't see any more hands raised. Is that true?
I think that was the last one.
All right, thank you so much. And again, we appreciate all the public comments. So I guess we can move to the next agenda item, which is the update on the elimination of the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment position for FY21. And this agenda item was requested by Mr. Murray. So I don't know if you wanted to start the discussion, Mr. Murray, or hand it off to Mr. Levis first, and then we'll go around and talk about it.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I part of this goes back to, we had a discussion a few months ago, and I know it's been a busy year, but part of that discussion was that we had approved certain stipends, and the logic behind that, just to explain, because I want to be clear, that was Mr. Cowart had moved into an assistant superintendent role. He was formerly the curriculum director. He, in that role, did a very good job, and there was thinking that he could dedicate a good portion of his time to continue on the curriculum. to advance the district, and in some of some of the tasks and things that Ms. Anderson was doing, we're going to get ferreted out to other existing staff. And we agreed as a committee to move forward with paying a stipend to existing personnel to take on those tasks. Questions I had at that time were really, what was the resource allocation? What were people taking on? What was the hourly allocation? And then, one of the concerns I continue to have, is that we lose that position. Because we are in a very difficult year, and because we chose to save, I think it was upwards of $130,000 by essentially eliminating that position from this year's budget. Because we haven't been funded, and if this drags on the next year, that position remains gone permanently. And I'm just not convinced that we made such strides in curriculum. And I know the assistant superintendent role was very different. And I'm always a big fan in just management that people step into different roles, they move into the role. They don't drag the work with them. And while Mr. Carrot did an absolutely outstanding job as curriculum coordinator, I just have a concern that we don't bring that position back as a full-time dedicated person. And I know we're talking always about cutting administration, but I see it as a key role that was really advancing our district for the future. And so, while the stipends were a good short-term gap, facing the budget issues I'm just wanted to have the larger discussion about this position, one, and also get the update that I asked for when this was passed, which is, how is it going? I'm hearing tonight, staff and administrators are completely tasked out with COVID. So the other concern I have is, we added on more, and now there's even more just due to the circumstances. So is everything actually getting done? Is curriculum getting done? Are all the tasks getting done? So that's long-winded, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Levis.
Yeah, so I just want to start by saying that, this wasn't an easy conversation. When we discussed this, obviously, it was in August, we presented, I believe. I remember last budget cycle when there was constant comments, publications made about double the amount of, administrators we had. And, so trying to be proactive, knowing the situation we're in, we talked about it as an administrative team to, Mr. Coward moving into assistant superintendent, still trying to figure out all the different roles. Like we're still in the process of discussing that. But we felt that for a year, and I think that's what we said. I wasn't, I've been in many situations where people before, like they would cut positions, whether it's to benefit themselves or to acquiesce political pressure. We did this for one reason. I want to be clear, to save $128,000. And, nobody knows what these times are like. I have no idea what my day is going to be like, So I just want to be clear. It wasn't, this was about saving money, but we also felt we could handle it. We know that we want a position back. I don't know if it needs to be the same. There's going to have to be a process, but I think it's even said that it would sunset at the end of this year. I can tell you the different functions that are taking place now. Dr. Sharkart's doing a phenomenal job in Title I. Mr. Wilson is Title IX. He's been to trainings. We'll be passing the policy. When you see the policy, you'll see how comprehensive that is, and I'm very comfortable and confident that he will take that on. We also have Ms. Anzalone and Mrs. Anzalone, Mrs. Maycumber are facilitating both the elementary and secondary. They've done a phenomenal job. Don and I are sharing different responsibilities. I took on different responsibilities. Some of them, like the truancy court piece, it hasn't started yet, but these are challenging times. But I want to be clear, there was never an intent just to say we're going to be done with it forever. And I think you brought that up. I'm not going to get into our conversations at executive session, but part of me, I regret part of me, and I'm just being completely frank here, regret it because we're taking this on. Nobody cares how hard you work. You know that. I know that. That's why I thank the administrators tonight. They care about results. And I made gist, I think on Friday the 13th, I said 12 plus 1 because there's so few things that we can control these days. But we have the willingness to make it happen. You saw it tonight. We bring forward, despite all the stuff that's going on, despite the fear that's in a lot of our employees because of the lack of support, wondering about how next year, because everybody knows next year is going to be more challenging. So, I think that we're doing a phenomenal job with the changes that we've made moving forward. But is it hard? It's extremely hard. I'm exhausted, and I don't say that often, but I know everybody's exhausted. So it isn't just I'm speaking for myself. I'm speaking, I think, for everybody in this audience. How can you not be exhausted when you're worrying about professional responsibilities and your personal responsibilities? So I think that, but I want to be clear, we never said that we're going to eliminate this forever. At the least we said we'll reevaluate. We've already, Don and I have had a lot of conversations about looking at, maybe some modifications of a position. And we understand the budget situation, but I think the caveat for us was we said we wanted to revisit this, and it sunsets on June 30th of 2021. So, every day is a challenge these days. I'd be lying to say that it isn't, but we did this to benefit. I mean, $128,000 is significant. We look back at our union, right? We've negotiated with both unions. We haven't brought the SRP for it. Our teachers gave back $500,000, $500,000, nothing to sneeze at. Probably the only union in the state that came back to the table. Our administrators didn't get raises. When I came on board, they had gone 7 years without raises, and we're not doormats. We may work for the community, but we have, they're extremely professional, our administrators, and they work extremely hard and give 100%. And as I said before, probably haven't taken a break since March 13th. So, we're trying to do our part just to help the community. And I know it's turned in there, I'm not going to get into it, turned into this thing where it's about individuals. This was about benefiting our school community, doing our part. Administrators haven't taken raises, and we've eliminated a position for this year and saved $128,000. So, I don't want to turn it into a negative. Is it challenging? I'll say personally, every day's challenging. And I said that, I think I was talking to Ms. Padno, just kidding around, all the things we're doing. And, oh, by the way, I'm supposed to run a district with 750 employees and almost 5,000 students. It's extremely challenging. But every day we keep moving forward despite the challenges that we're facing, both from the pandemic and from the financial challenges that we know we're facing, that we're the only community in this situation locally. Everybody's faced with the state issue, but Coventry is unique. And yet every day our administrative team come and give 100%. So I know that's my long-winded way of saying, but as superintendent, I'm very comfortable with how those other individuals that have taken on responsibilities are doing a phenomenal job. I think our high school and our middle school have never worked closer together. And our elementary, principals are working. Mrs. Anzalone is doing a phenomenal job problem solving with our principals, facilitating. Like I said, Dr. Shotgard and Brad Wilson are very competent in what they're doing and very supportive. So I think for this year, we'll make it work. But we will be coming back to the school committee probably in early spring. I know Mr. Pearson had talked about we need to look at our organizational chart. I need to redo that. But we're looking at what would that position look like? Because unless it's the same position and we come back and ask for it, which I don't think it will be, we'll present that and we'll need approval from the school committee and we'll need, to look at that. I think that, these are extremely challenging times, but I don't regret, I regret from the public relations aspect of it, but I don't regret doing what we did because we did our part, and we continue to do our part.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear. I mean, it was a very pointed update. It's not to say you're not working hard. It's not to peg anybody. The truth is everyone's busy. I want to make sure that we don't get burnout. It was a decision that was made based purely on financials. It's always not the best decision, right? And we did get held over a barrel with some public members because of it, because they didn't truly understand why we did it. I agree with that. I just want to make sure that, because we made a decision kind of trying to help the budget, that's not always what's best for the district. What may be best for the district is sometimes towing the line in the administration and saying, we need certain resources, right? And so, believe me, I've been on the other side banging on the administration, that. But I'm much closer to the operations than I used to be, right? And so I've come to appreciate all the work that goes into it. And I don't think the public can truly appreciate all of it. So, Mr. Coward, I guess one pointed question I'd have for you is how much time have you been able to dedicate to curriculum development or oversight?
So, yeah, I was going to kind of chime in with that. So my role now is kind of split between operations and curriculum. And because of COVID and because of some of the things that come with that, I end up leaning more towards the operation sides of things because there are so many systems and things that we have to put in place to make things work. I'm certainly not ignoring the curriculum work. And luckily we have some curriculum pieces already like in the flow. We have world languages already moving along. We already have social studies moving along. We have a number of content areas that are already in the flow, but I haven't been able to initiate a lot of new things this year. And that's partly because of the capacity to do the work, but the other part of it has to do with the capacity of people to get together and meet and to begin to share ideas. Because when you're working on curriculum work, Zoom can be challenging. I'm not going to lie. You're looking at documents, you're looking at books, you're looking at scope and sequence, and people like to spread out, put things on walls, write down and chart, and it's difficult to do that in a Zoom setting. So luckily, the work that we've started continues to move, but it continues to move because we already have teams in place. There are teachers and teacher leaders who are moving that work along, and I'm just checking in with them and monitoring them along the way. New curriculum work. We have some ELA work happening, and a lot of the reason why we're able to make that happen is because Department of Ed is working with Ed Reports, and we joined a cohort like we did last year to help facilitate that process. So Department of Ed and Ed Reports has helped move that along, and we had some money through a grant that we got to help fund professional development and materials. So that's happening mostly because we have this relationship with Ed Reports and Department of Ed. But it is a challenge. I'm not going to say to the community there's no curriculum work going on. I could never let that happen on my watch. There's curriculum work happening. It's just a little bit more difficult right now. And time is just kind of split. And I'm not the only person who's busy. Everybody's busy. I think that's part of the problem because we're all pitching in different places in different ways. It does make it difficult to have really organized systems that are predictable and easy to use when you have a leadership structure where people are all doing different parts of the same kind of work, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I'm sure it's difficult to continue to be dynamic and come up with curriculum on the fly with distance learning and all the other things coming at you. So I guess, moving forward, and I'll zip up my, I'll let the other committee members put in their 2 cents. But from my standpoint, I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight that the curriculum coordinator was an important position and that it stays as a position, that even though it's not currently funded, that we need to revisit this. And I know, we have current budget challenges and this is why we did it, right? I voted for it too, knowing that, hey, I'll take the money. But that said, I talked about this last meeting. What I don't want to see is these cuts that we make now have a long-term structural impact on the district. So things like, we were making good progress in curriculum. I saw the binders done in your office. We went through how we had no coordinated curriculum, essentially none. And you've made great strides in collapsing a lot of that and really streamlining. And so we weren't there yet. And I applaud your new position. I just not sure, I'm ready to give up all that progress because I know assistant superintendent, even with all the tasks suspended, you're likely to be put on a million other tasks that weren't getting fulfilled. Because I know we're not top heavy, despite what the community may say. I know you're all working extremely hard. So this is an advocacy for the position. That's usually, I say take it because it doesn't usually happen that somebody says, hey, I think you need to keep an administrator, right? So I'm advocating for this. I'm championing that curriculum cause. So, and I'll leave it there.
We have 6 certified administrators in central office. That's not a lot. We have other people in administrative roles that are not certified administrators, but there's 6 of us that are certified. And for the amount of work we do, for the size of the district we have, that's very lean. And I know other districts are not structured that way. And I will say, in the past, when I first got to Coventry, the curriculum responsibilities did sit with the assistant superintendent. There were other support positions in place that kind of got collapsed, and that's how Craig was able to fund a director of curriculum position, because he collapsed 2 or 3 positions into one. But the ultimate responsibility sat with the assistant superintendent. And this is no shade against anybody who sat in this seat before me, but the assistant superintendent position wasn't able to monitor and maintain that curriculum work in the way that it needed to be done. And that's why it had been a number of years since curriculum had been updated. And I've used these numbers before, and I have no problem saying them again. Our phys ed curriculum was over 20 years out of date. That's a long time. Our health curriculum had not been updated at all. There's world language that had not been done in a number of years. So we put it all on a cycle, but somebody has to manage that cycle. And I just don't want it to slip to where it was before, because that's going to inhibit us. And some of the things that we talk about with districts having competing programs and students leaving. The examples today were about people leaving to go and do sports, but sometimes we have people leave to go do other academic programs. And it's hard to maintain competitiveness when you don't have somebody dedicated to making sure that we have the most rigorous, up-to-date curriculum pieces in place, because sometimes people will make choices because they don't think we're adequate. And it's our job to prove to the community that we're worthy of their trust, and that we're going to put forth the best product we can. And we can only do that with somebody who's dedicated to making sure that work happens.
I agree. Thank you.
Can I just add to something though? But Don's role is as a facilitator. And so the reason, and again, this wasn't a top-down decision, we made this collectively, but part of it is that the teachers are doing the work. We talk about distributive leadership, it's teacher leadership. So a lot of things that have been in place are still going, as Don said. I go into Don's office all the time. He's meeting with different people. So I don't want to give the impression that the work has just stopped or just kind of trickling. The teachers are still doing a lot of the work. Don still meets with individuals. And so for 1 year, pulling together and keeping our hands in different pots, we felt that we could do that. And again, it was about the money. It wasn't about, we've talked from the get-go that, what is this new position when we come back to the committee? Because it doesn't need to look the same as it was before. Because my expectation of Don as an assistant superintendent and things that he may do may be different than, when Lori was in that position. She had different skill sets, so we're trying to maximize that. But I want to be clear that the work hasn't stopped and we're just kind of fumbling through. But our priority right now is safety, right? Our priority is safety. And that, not only safety in terms of physical safety, but looking at people's mental health and our students and our staff. And so that is a priority. And that's what we spend a lot of our time dealing with. And I think you talk to any other district, that's what they're going to be dealing with too. But I just don't want to give the impression that, everything is stopped, and because it hasn't. We still talking today about STAR data, and there's some really positive, we're not going to get into it tonight, but there's some really positive. So I want to be clear that, we recognize that we need that other person, but what that role may look like will be different. We think that because of what in the past, the assistant superintendent position has been a catch-all. Doesn't mean it made sense. Now we have a chance to pull back the layers and figure out, like what that other position could look like. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Florio.
I've since the ballot question failed, I've reassessed my position on that, on giving these raises, because it was used against us. And I think Mr. Pearson had the foresight to see it. And that's one of the reasons why the budget failed, because certain members of the council were saying the administrators gave themselves raises. And I would say, well, no, they weren't really raises because they saved about $120,000 by eliminating that position. But it was used against the school committee, and it was used against Mr. Levis and the people who took that money. And I really, here we go. I'm back.
Okay.
Here we go. But, I'm looking at it, and, it was hard for me to explain to people that we were saving money and that they weren't getting raises. They were getting money because they were working hard. They were working almost 24/7, to be honest with you, with being on call and everything else that Mr. Levis and Mr. Calworth and the team did. But it wasn't perceived that way by the public. It just wasn't perceived that way. It was perceived as something that we did something wrong, and we didn't. So I'm kind of glad Mr. Murray asked for this to be placed on the agenda, because I remember one time a councilman by the name of Ken De Silva said, perception is everything in politics. And the perception was that we did something, and the council made it look that way, and the town manager, they made it look like we did something wrong. And we didn't. We did something right, but it was perceived that we did something wrong. And I just want people to understand that. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Hold on. There we go.
Yeah. I just want to say that it's kind of water under the bridge. And so the discussion for today was not so much whether or not we made the right decision or if it was a public relations disaster, et cetera, et cetera. We all know that we didn't give raises. Their base salary stayed the same. We certainly didn't use the whole 130,000. We just used a portion of it so that we knew that somehow the work was going to continue. Maybe not at the same level. I don't think there was ever that promise. And then with COVID on top of it, obviously there's only 24 hours in any day. So that being said, the only concern I have, and well, I'm not as concerned if we were getting new school committee members to this committee, and this was an election year that people's who weren't involved in this decision were new to the table. I think that there would be a real danger that people would see us adding a position in FY 22. And that is always a dangerous thing, because when you put up your budget for discussion for the new budget for FY 22, and you say you're adding a position, that's not really what we're doing. We're replacing someone. And so it's basically a placeholder, but some people wouldn't see it that way. So basically, if we had posted that position and nobody filled it, we'd still be saving $120,000, $130,000. We still might have said, hey, is there anybody in administration that we're not able to fill this for whatever reason. And the work still needs to go on. So could we still do some of it or a portion of it, and maybe, give some extra stipends to some folks who are already, experienced in this area? But the position would still sit there, open, ready to be funded. And so I think that was really the concern about this particular discussion. We don't want to be in the position in the spring or in February, whenever we start building the new FY 22 budget, that this is seen as an added position. because it's not. And so I feel pretty safe that people in this committee aren't going to be questioning that. There could be some public questioning, and I think we just have to stand our guns and say, you know, this position just wasn't filled because of budget. But that next year we have to ask for it. And the fact that it may change a little bit in the way of restructuring administration, I think the primary, you know, that's obviously up to the administration to figure out what they want to call it. But I think it has to be close to the old position, quite honestly. It's director of curriculum, and if you want to put some and on it, but it does have to focus on curriculum, because I think it is, like Mr. Murray says, like, you know, Mr. Coward has said, and Mr. Levis, all of you know how critical this is if we are going to move forward with student achievement. It has to get done. So one way or the other, that position needs to be we have to have that placeholder in place. And it might have been clearer to the public if we had posted it, but just didn't fill it. I mean, let's face it, that happens all the time. You can post a position and you just don't get anybody good enough to get it, to take the place. That doesn't mean the work doesn't stop in the district. Other people have to take up some of those duties until the new person comes on board. And sometimes they do it for nothing, depends on the organization. But oftentimes you get a one-time bump, not on your base, but just to actually do those extra duties because you're doing different. And so I think that's what the discussion was about tonight. And Mr. Murray was more concerned that somehow, because of new budget constraints, it would continue to kind of, you know, not be filled. And I think that we all know as a committee that it has to be. That's just my feeling on the matter. I wasn't opposed to putting it on the agenda because I think it is an important issue that we can't lose sight of, and that has to continue. And I think the work is continuing this year as best as it can, considering COVID. You know, if COVID wasn't in the picture and we hadn't filled it, you know, for whatever reason, maybe, I mean, obviously, like I said, there's only so many hours in a day. Simple. So, I've said my piece and I usually go last, but Mr. Pearson, did you want to speak to this at all?
Sure. I'm going to respectfully disagree with some of the things you said, and with respect, because I think it's an interpretation, my interpretation of what Mr. Murray was asking for, and I'm not putting words in his mouth. So this is, again, my interpretation, was really focused on also is how is this decision working out? You know, it is the concern that our administrators are, are they becoming overworked and overtaxed? I'm glad to hear Mr. Levis emphatically support the quality of their work, but at the same time, the impression I have been getting, because of all the circumstances going on, is that everyone seems to be more overtaxed than usual, and understood there's extenuating circumstances with the COVID and everything surrounding that. So again, my initial concern that this decision would, has a high risk of leading to burnout or things falling off the table, or, as I'm hearing in the commentary, things are getting done maybe with not as much focus as it was before, or things are getting done, but maybe, not as some things are not a high as priority as they were before, because we don't have as many staff focusing on that as the responsibilities have been distributed out. I would argue that to me is a case for this isn't working out as well as we hoped. I know it's a budgetary issue, and if we leave it as a budgetary issue, fine. But if the next council passes a budget, I'm going to argue immediately for reopening that position this fiscal year. I don't think we wait until end of the fiscal year. I don't think that is a correct thing to do. So while I'm glad we have revisited this now, we may want to revisit this again in the future as the budget progresses further. I'm still not comfortable. You know, I was a negative vote on this decision for just the reasons I expressed. You know, there's a lot of work to do, and I'm concerned we're spreading our resources too thinly. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Very good comments. And where am I? Mrs. Colonian, have you had a chance to speak yet?
I haven't, but I agree with Mr. Pearson. I think that we do need this position, and while it was great that they stepped up and took pieces of that position, it really is a temporary thing, and it does, you know, there is burnout that that comes with taking on extra responsibilities. So I'm going to stand along with Mr. Pearson and say that if we get a budget pass, I'd like to see the position put back, because we need that. That we've done so well. Don did a great job, you know, when with that position, and I think that you know, we want to continue that. So that's all I have to say.
Madam Chair, can I just make a comment?
Sure.
I just want to say that you know, in terms of burnout, I mean, I don't know how to say this. I mean, we're dealing with, think about it, all the systems that are in place, the governor saying office people stay home and all these things, and closing down capacity. We have children in our elementary schools that are elbow to elbow, right? You know, we're dealing with COVID from, you know, I wake up sometimes early in the morning and I'll have a text that we had a positive case, and you see how many emails do you receive from me. So, I mean, you could take everything off my plate in the conditions. I mean, I'm responsible for 750 employees, almost 5,000 students, right? So, I mean, that alone is an incredible responsibility. Our principals, our staff, both central office, and they have such great responsibility. So I just want to, you know, I know we put it all together, but the exhaustion doesn't come from different responsibilities. It comes from the overarching responsibility during a pandemic. The inconsistencies of information we get from the Department of Ed or from the governor's office in trying to make sense, because everybody looks to us to make sure that we're doing the right thing, that they'll be okay, that we're going to make the right decision tomorrow. So I just want to be clear. I know, you know, I brought up the exhaustion as part of this, but you know, my personal life is exhausting, worrying about my 83-year-old mother, taking care, you know, I mentioned before my son. So I just want to be clear in that I stand by the decision we made. And, you know, I know Mr. Coward talked about, you know, career tech and people making choices, but let's face it, since we've been on board, we've done a lot of work. There was curriculum work, I think it was in social studies, that hadn't been done for 20 years or 16 years. So to take us a break, no matter what we have on our plate, we're going to be focused on COVID and keeping people safe. And I just want to be clear, there's nothing I can say to change people's mind, but I'm going to tell you that I'm still standing behind the decision we made. But, you know, if in March and we have a budget and we want to put a position back, I'm all for that. I'm all for that. But remember, we saved $128,000, right? When, you know, like I said, the teachers union gave up $500,000. Administrators didn't get raises, and we gave up, we also put back $120,000, doing our part right now when, you know, I don't want to compare it to other departments or whatever, but, you know, we've faced challenges every single day I've been in this position.
And I understand that. No one's saying anything about your decision. All I'm saying is it's a very important position. And if you can get the opportunity, I'd like that back, rather than somebody saying, well, you've done without it this long, and then it's gone.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I just want to be clear that, you know, that we knew this was going to be challenging, and there was one reason why we did it, but it wasn't to say we're going to let everything fall apart. I mean, I just don't want to give that impression that the work is continuing to get done. I don't think anything's falling apart. And as Mr. Coward said, that a lot of the curriculum work, just in the nature of what we're doing, but the work that we put in place is still going on. Teachers are still doing the work. Teams are getting together and working on that. So I agree. We've already talked about that. We've talked about what that position, obviously it'll involve curriculum, but it may not have to do everything that Mr. Coward did before. We can move some things around. So we're all on board with that too. I fully agree with that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Levis. Mr. Murray, did you have something finally to say?
Very much more. I just wanted to say, I agree. I wanted to say thank you. What I was saying was both your points, both you, Ms. Patnode, and Mr. Pearson. Check the validity of, where are we at? I agree with the decision as a snapshot in time, Mr. Levis. That's not the argument. It's just to check back and make sure. I make a million decisions a day a few months later that I say, maybe that wasn't such a great decision, right? We're throwing the lifeline in to say, we support this position. And if it's becoming, I know you have a million other things, if we can take that task and also make sure that it gets 100% of the attention that it deserves, we want to get that position back. And Kathy, I also share your concern that if we do not, we're going to be back into the 22 budget in a month. And if we don't have that funded, we're not going to get it back. And to your point, the optics, to Dave's point, to the public, maybe that we're adding positions, and we don't want that. We don't need another battle to fight. So all the points that have been brought up here are great, valid, including the superintendents. And I agree, Mr. Pearson. I think at least we should revisit, if we do get a budget, at least revisit this. Not saying we will or won't, but I think it needs to be a serious discussion on how we move forward. So, but thank you for putting it on the agenda. I really do appreciate it.
No problem. I think we'll revisit it obviously again. I don't see any hands raised from the public. If anybody has any thing to add to this discussion, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll move forward. Oh, one and then a change. Mr. Murphy, we don't have any hands raised?
There are no more hands.
All right, thank you. Okay, then I guess we can move to agenda item number 12, the school building committee update. And I assume, Mr. Murray, you're prepared to start this.
I am. I'll keep it brief. I know it's been a long meeting. I guess the first thing I would ask as a request is if the next meeting I could go earlier in the agenda, because I see people are falling off. And I want to make sure as this gets closer to the stage 2 submission that we give it a little bit more focus at the beginning, potentially, because I want people to be aware these meetings are going on and what's being discussed. So if you would indulge me that convenience, I'd appreciate it.
No problem.
So as some of you know, I sent out an email today to the building committee with another concept, and I'll just put up a screen with a little bit of a teaser on what they're seeing or saw. So this is a snapshot from the video. This is one of 3 concepts. So the previous building committee meeting, the committee voted to move forward with consideration of 2 concepts for the Allen Shawn Feinstein Middle School. And as many know, we're looking at a major renovation of that facility as part of the stage 2 approval. That doesn't necessarily mean, and I'll be clear on this for anyone listening, that we're going to definitely move forward this, that we're bonding, but this is our plan for the stage 2 submission to RIDE to ask for a potential reimbursement. So this is really exciting to me. This is the 3rd option that the architect put forward. It's exciting just because I see an actual rendering of a building here. So this is the 3rd option that the architect presented. I sent out an email today with a survey to the building committee. I do want to send this out also to the larger community after our meeting with the other, after, not specifically this, but whatever option or options we choose to move forward with after the next meeting, which is on the 24th at 6 o'clock. So those who want to tune in on Zoom can do that. I'll stop the share. So I'd encourage anybody who wants to be involved in the process to join us for that meeting. We will be discussing the newest option and also bring context into the previous options that have been discussed. I have reached out to the town manager again about meeting with bond counsel. He did get back to me today saying that he's going to try to get Steve Massaroni and others to a meeting early next week to discuss, because at some point very soon, we're going to have to start talking some real numbers. And as I've expressed before, I don't want to just start talking very large numbers without having some clarity what it means to average taxpayers if we were to move forward with a bond in the future. So that's in process. Also, Mr. Carrot, I need to circle back with you. I know that about the communications effort, but we've made some decisions on that, and I'll share that with the building committee at our next meeting. So process is moving forward. The architect, I had a meeting with him late last week via Zoom. He gave me an update on various things that he's working on, but the stage 2 seems to be progressing on schedule. One of my concerns is that, and I think this is a concern for the budget as well, I expected to have the new members of the council seated by the end of the month. And it appears that's not going to happen because the votes won't even be certified until the 30th, which means I believe the projected date is the 14th to swear in the new council. So what I'm going to propose to the building committee is that I create a webinar video that kind of summarizes everything we've done to this point, like a 30 to 45-minute video that anybody from the public can view, but I'm hoping that the new council members especially will view so they can get up to date. Because the new members of the council are elected, I can no longer go have coffee with them. It's an open public meeting. They fall under OMA. So that means that to get with them, I mean, there's a couple options there. We can have a joint meeting, but until they're seated, you really can't do that. So the other option is to try to just push information out as effectively as I can to get to the entire community, including those members, and get them up to speed, because a month later, we'll be really presenting 100% report and be asking them to vote on this thing to move it forward. Hopefully they will. As I said over and over, it's a plan to ride for consideration for reimbursement. It's no commitment, but I know we've had a rocky road here in the community over the past year, so I don't want to hit any more bumps. So with that, I think if anybody has any questions, or Mr. Levis, if you have anything to add, or.
I just want to thank you. I think you've done a phenomenal job with the other committee members, but just keeping this moving forward. You know, we talked earlier about, you know, despite the challenges that we're all facing, keeping initiatives moving forward. But I think this is so important to the community, and hopefully something that the community can rally around. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Anybody
Mr.
else?
Levis.
Right. So the next meeting's the 24th. And many of you are on the building committee, so I'll see you there anyway. But hopefully anybody in the community is interested. It should be fun. There's a video showing a fly through of the new concepts. We'll be discussing also some of the strategies to address the other buildings beyond the middle school, you know, what the larger strategy will be. So should be good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Murray. Is anybody in the public interested in commenting or asking Mr. Murray any questions? I do not see any hands raised. So again, thank you, Mr. Murray. And I echo Mr. Levis's comments. You are doing an excellent job spearheading this committee through the various and keeping us on task. It's been a pleasure working with you, that's for sure. So that being said, I guess we can move to 13, which is the superintendent's report. Mr. Levis.
Sure. So the first topic is just that I was going through, we know that we're coming close to the end of November. Last year's budget calendar was adopted, I believe, in October 15th. and I know the charter, correct me if I'm wrong, but indicates that we're supposed to have a joint meeting with the town council to discuss FY22 budget in December. So, and I know there's a lot going on, and I'm not just putting this on the town side, but I did reach out to Mr. Wazika, Mr. Arnett, I CC'd Ms. Mandrelli, just to say, you know, where do we stand? Because, you know, I know we're supposed to have a meeting. I don't know what, you know, the charter says that we're supposed to have a meeting. I assume they probably were hoping that the new council was seated, but the fact of the matter is they won't be seated, as Mr. Murray said. And I haven't heard back yet in terms of what's going on. So I just wanted to update the you know, the committee that, you know, I'm not sure where we stand in terms of having a joint meeting. I don't know if any of the committee members have any additional information. I know, I don't know. I know they have a meeting Monday night. I'm not sure what the agenda will be on the meeting, if this will be on the agenda. But, you know, we know, you know, we passed our budget for FY21, a revised budget the other night. You know, I'm not sure where we'll stand. We know, you know, a lot does hinge on this year's budget. There's so many unknowns, obviously, with our local appropriation and state appropriation. But, you know, that's where we stand right now. I'm hoping to hear something, or at least Monday night, the council meeting, maybe it'll be addressed. And I'll share that information with the committee. So that was that. I don't know if there's any questions or comments or.
I just have may I ask a question, Madam Chair? Sarah, I believe the town's supposed to provide a projection of revenue for the charter by November. Did that happen, or is that an ongoing basis thing that they do anyway, or?
No, so we usually do present projections of revenue and expense. It's almost impossible to do right now for next year, but no, I haven't received anything yet from the town at all.
Yeah,
I mean,
this
I know
was
it's
sorry to interrupt. This was a little bit of a sticking point last year, because I think historically, at least since I've been on school committee, you know, the school department has always presented their projected revenue in December, which is very early to do it. And the town is also supposed to provide something to us as well. Last year they did, but I think that was the first time in recent memory that they've ever done that. We'll probably have to ask them for it again. I don't think it'll be an automatic, even though it's in the charter, but very good point.
And just the last point, the joint meeting, I pulled it up, no later than December 31st. So we have a little bit of time. Maybe we can meet on Christmas over some eggnog.
Only if it's your immediate family.
Right. You're not in my pod. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I don't really know much about the future planned meetings for the council, but I did have a conversation with Ian, and she was like sticking to the usual schedule. And I just pointed out to her that I thought there might have to be some other non-scheduled meetings between us and them, and not just a regular scheduled meeting. And she seemed like she thought that was something that she could support. So again, we have to wait for the new council to be sworn in. But I suspect we'll have opportunities to have some workshops that presently are not on the town council schedule right now. And it may even be in December. So I am hopeful that will in fact happen. So that's yet to be seen. Once they're sworn in, once the vote is certified on the 30th, hopefully we'll get some movement. But that's it for me. I guess you have one more thing, Mr. Levis?
Yes. Mr. Murphy, I don't know if you can pull up the data sheet on the cases. I know it's hard to see. I think what's important, I'm just going to jump to the last line. We started looking at positive cases of students. You see November 7th, we had 8. November 13th, we had 15. Positive cases staff, we had 1 on November 7th, we had 5 on November 13th. And I just want to state as we go through this, our positivity rate is, you know, when you look at percentage, it's not even a percentage point in terms of our population, students in school. But what's significant is if you look at how does this impact our schools? So when you look at confirmed close contact students, November 7th, we had 88. The week before we had 50. November 13th, we had 328. And so that means that when we look at a positive case, whether it was a staff or a student, and we look at how many students does that impact? How many students are we putting out? And that could potentially be quarantined. That's 328. Confirmed close contact staff, that's 51. So that's the number of staff members that we lost in that week of November 13th. And that's why we say, I still believe firmly that our schools are much safer. Mr. Coward had just shared with me the week of November 14th, ending positivity rate in Coventry was, I believe, 10.1%. It was data taken from the journal that was taken from the Department of Health, 10.1%. So our schools are much safer than the community at large. And according to the epidemiologists that look at the data we have, they have not been able to state that there's spread going, people are coming to school and catching COVID in school, that there's not community spread within our schools, that as of now, it's being brought in. And we know that we talk to families that parents test positive and then their child tests positive. But the challenge is staffing. We are struggling. We're at a tipping point right now. You know, Washington, Western Coventry, I'm just going to focus on one school right now. The other day I was over there, they were down 12 staff. For a small elementary school, 12 staff. And yet they make it work. I mean, so then when we talk about the exhaustion, I can't imagine, and I'm just focusing on Mrs. Anzalone now, but knowing that you have 12 staff to cover it, yet keeping your students in school and your staff in school and making sure people are safe. That's the work that's going on. We're fighting really hard to keep students in school. And it's challenging. It's challenging. And I've said all along, and I'll continue to say that at any given day, we may have to close a classroom, a team, a school. And we're at that point now where staffing is again, like I said before, we're at a tipping point where, you know, we've hired a lot of subs, but we have subs that are out on quarantine. And, you know, our high school's out, and that may continue through next week. You know, and I've spoken to administrators, and we've talked about, you know, would it make sense to turn next week into a distance learning so that we can get people back? So when we open on the 30th, you know, the information that came out last night and this morning, today, around the high school closure, and there's a meeting tomorrow with the commissioner, and I'm not going to get into that. That really wasn't the agenda topic, but we're working hard to keep people safe. We'll continue to update this sheet every week. It's on our website under testing. It's challenging. It's extremely challenging. I spoke to my colleague in West Warwick and in Cranston, looking at what they're thinking of doing moving forward. You know, we are doing everything in our power to make sure that we keep people safe. Everybody's working extremely hard. You know, the additional custodians has made a big difference. I've gone in and spoken to several lead custodians. You know, having the additional nurses, remember some of the pushback that we received or comments that were made publicly, you know, or in the chat about, you know, why do we need additional nurses? I don't know how we would do this. One of our nurses spent 6 hours doing contact tracing on one elementary case the other day. You know, a lot of that's been put back on us. People are working extremely hard. You know, and we're going to keep doing what we are every single day. I'm concerned about the holidays. I'm concerned about, you know, we saw after Halloween a spike. I'm concerned about Thanksgiving, what we'll experience afterwards in Christmas. You know, and we'll do the best we can. We'll continue to communicate with the committee, with the community. Like I said, it's decisions are made on an ongoing basis. It's very hard to make a decision today for next week. You know, and that's our truth. So we want to keep the community informed, but you know, I still believe, based on all the data, and I know you hear that everywhere about the science, I'm definitely not a scientist, but our schools are safe places to be. It really comes down to staffing. We're struggling with that. And, you know, I need to take a hard look at that tomorrow, you know, because every day we get phone calls, we get emails from staff or from parents that students are out. And again, it's not just that student, it's how many people it's going to put out. And we're at a point now where we can't afford to lose any more staff within the district. So any questions anybody has, but I just want to, you know, every week, every school committee meeting, we'll come back, we'll share this data. You know, there's been a lot of great feedback that people have given, you know, the distance learning component at the high school. I know that, I want you to know that people have taken that seriously. The high school's looking at that to do better, to service our students, to have more engagement, more contact. We appreciate the feedback we get from the committee, from the parents, from the students. So I want to know, this is like this ongoing quality improvement process that we're involved with. And, you know, despite the challenges we face every single day, again, safety is a priority. But we're at that point, again, just want to reiterate with staffing that we can't afford to lose another person. Every school is maxed out in terms of the amount of staff that we can afford to lose. So with that, I'll entertain any questions that I can answer.
Are there any questions from anybody on the committee? I don't have any questions. Any comments? We're all good. Are there any questions or comments from the attendees? I see one hand up, Mr. Murphy.
Okay. Joshua, you're up next. Just state your name and address for the record and unmute your microphone.
Hi, Josh Clements, 10 Gentry Farm Road. Again, just want to say thank you to the administration and the teachers and the staff for continuing the in-person education. You know, my young daughter is definitely benefiting from the kindergarten experience and hoping that it can remain, especially out at Western with the recent cases. I think it comes down to personal responsibility on the community. I hope everyone's following the rules and knock it off. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. I don't see any other hands up, Mr. Murphy. Is that true?
That appears to be it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Levis, for that report. The next item is citizens' comments. Are there any attendees that wish to have their hand raised so that they can comment? I don't see any, Mr. Murphy. Is that true?
No, actually, one just came through.
Oh, I just see it. Yep. Okay.
All right, Amanda, you're up. Please state your full name and address for the record and unmute your microphone.
Hi, Amanda Aldana, 521 Reed Schoolhouse Road. I was just curious if you have a plan, and I know everything's day by day, but I'm just thinking for the kids who are doing at the high school, per se, like my daughter's doing nursing and my son is doing the computer program that you have. Now, I know originally they had said that that is not something that you can do distant. So I'm just curious, are you going to be able to continue those courses even though it's going to be going full distance for a while?
Yeah, I don't want to get in too much because I know the high school is still working. Again, this was just came at us yesterday, but what I can say, because it's public knowledge, is the governor did say that we can go back to our limited plan. And so for Coventry, at the high school, our limited plan was to bring in CTE students along with special education students, ELL students and special populations. So, you know, and have up to 25%. But we want to do the best we can at the high school level to make sure that students that would benefit from in-person learning would get in-person learning. So I know the high school put together plans, and we'll make sure we share that with I'll share it with the school committee first, and then we'll share it with the community as soon as that comes to fruition, which will be, shortly.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think you guys are all doing a really wonderful job, especially with the pandemic. And just as a side note, my son's teacher is Mrs. Hammer at Washington Oak, and the stuff she does with all the kids and just listening to my son and all the other kids talking at the same time, she's an angel. And I think she's doing a phenomenal job, especially virtually. So I just wanted to put that out, that we appreciate everything that the teachers are doing, you guys behind the scenes, and especially my son's teacher, Miss Hammer. She's doing a very good job with, with the pandemic, with what she's been given. And it's definitely a hard job, I will say, listening to all the kids talk at once and having to mute and teaching them this way. So I give all the teachers a lot of credit, especially the distant learning teachers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's greatly appreciated to hear those positive remarks. Okay.
Seems to be it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Then I think we can move on to scheduling the next meeting. Is there a motion? You're muted, Mr. Florio.
Madam Chair, I make a motion. Now you know why I keep the mic on.
I know. Sorry.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to schedule next meeting, I believe for December 3rd.
This December 10th. Is it the 3rd?
Is it
Second?
the 9th?
10th.
December 9th, right, Donna?
Oh,
No,
yeah.
December 10th.
December 10th.
Yeah.
December 10th at
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Okay, 6 p.m.
I second the motion.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries 5-0. And is there a motion to adjourn? It's 9:41.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to adjourn at 9:41 p.m.
Second the motion.
And I will ask for a roll call, since we can't see Mr. Pearson raise his hand. So could we have a roll call? Could we have a roll call?
Kathy Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Luke Murray,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Great. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all for attending. Thank you all, committee members and panelists. I guess we won't see each other before Thanksgiving, so I'm wishing everyone a very safe and healthy and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
To
Thank you.
all of you and your
Thank you,
loved ones.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Good
Thank
Thanksgiving.
you. To all the attendees out there, I hope you have a safe and healthy Thanksgiving with your family. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Kathy.